Hey there, folks. If you're tuning in for a peaceful dive into the ancient world, make sure to like this if it helps you unwind, subscribe for more stories from the sands of time, and drop a comment on what mysteries you'd like to explore next. Let's ease into the gentle rhythm of history together. Imagine the sun rising over the vast plateau of Giza in the 26th century BCE, its golden light spilling across the Nile's fertile banks like a warm blanket settling over the land. Here, in the heart of ancient Egypt's Old Kingdom, life moves with the steady pulse of the river, where every day brings the quiet hum of craftsmanship that sustained a civilization. We're stepping into the world of the brewers, those unsung artisans whose hands shaped one of humanity's earliest elixirs. Beyond the legends that whisper through the ages, we find a simple truth. Beer was more than drink, it was life itself, a daily ritual woven into the fabric of existence. As the stars fade and the first birds call softly in the pre-dawn air, let us wander through this serene landscape, where the air carries the faint, earthy scent of barley, and the distant murmur of the Nile lulls the senses. In those early hours, the brewers of Giza awakened to a world bathed in soft hues, their mudbrick homes nestled among the fields that fringed the Great Pyramids. These men and women, clad in simple linen kilts that sway with each step out into the cool morning mist, their movements deliberate and unhurried. Archaeological reports from the Old Kingdom, unearthed from sites like the Giza necropolis, paint a picture of these workers as essential cogs in the great machine of society. They weren't the pharaohs or the scribes, but their craft fed the laborers who hauled stones for monuments that still stand today. Picture them gathering at the communal vats, large circular basins crafted from sun-baked mud bricks, their surfaces worn smooth by generations of use. The brewers kneel beside these vessels, their fingers sifting through heaps of golden barley grains, each one selected with care from the previous harvest's yield. As they begin their work, the air fills with a symphony of subtle sounds and scents designed to soothe the mind. The grains are mixed with water drawn from the Nile, its flow as eternal as the stars above, and the brewers stir the mixture with wooden paddles, creating a gentle bubbling that rises like a whisper. Imagine the soft, rhythmic splash as the paddle dips and lifts, the yeast awakening in the warm vat, releasing a fragrance that mingles sweet malt with a hint of tartness, like the first breath of morning dew on ripe figs. The dusty air, carrying particles of ground grain and the faint mineral tang of the riverbank, settles lightly on the skin, a comforting veil that speaks of continuity and peace. These sensory details, drawn from the remnants of ancient brewing sites excavated in Giza, evoke a tranquility that belies the labor involved, for here was a craft born of necessity and elevated to an art. The brewer's days unfold in a cycle as predictable as the seasons, each step a meditation on the gifts of the land. They mash the barley into a coarse mash, adding date palms or emmer wheat for flavor, their kilts tied securely to keep them cool under the climbing sun. Reports from Old Kingdom tombs and granaries reveal that beer was not merely a beverage but a cornerstone of daily sustenance, providing nourishment and even serving as currency in a society where water could be unreliable. In this era, long before the complexities of later dynasties, the brewer's role was revered for its practicality, ensuring that workers in the fields and on the pyramid sites had the strength to carry on. There's a subtle wit in how these artisans transformed humble ingredients into something vital, turning dusty grains into a liquid that quenched both body and spirit, all without fanfare or acclaim. As the mixture ferments in the vats, the brewers pause to monitor its progress, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of midday light filtering through palm fronds. The yeast bubbles steadily, a low, effervescent hum that resonates like a distant lullaby, while the air grows warmer, carrying the rich aroma of fermenting mash that evokes the scent of baked bread mingled with the earth's own breath. Sensory memories from archaeological studies, such as those of the Giza brewing installations, describe how the brewers might have inhaled deeply, appreciating the transformation unfolding before them. It's in these moments that the importance of their craft shines through, a quiet pillar of stability in a world of monumental achievements. Beer was more than sustenance. It was a social glue, shared in communal feasts and offered in rituals to honor the gods, its creation a daily affirmation of life cycles. Yet amid this peaceful rhythm, there lingers a gentle mystery that adds a layer of intrigue without disturbing the calm. The names of these brewers, etched nowhere in the hieroglyphs of tombs or the annals of the time, remain unrecorded, lost to the sands like whispers carried away by the wind. Old Kingdom archaeological evidence, from the sparse inscriptions on pottery shards and the organized layouts of worker villages near Giza, shows us tools and processes, but seldom the individuals behind them. This absence invites a soft contemplation. Why were these vital craftspeople overlooked in the grand narratives? Perhaps it was the nature of their work, so essential and everyday that it blended into the background, like the Nile's flow itself. There's a subtle wit in this anonymity, a reminder that history often favors the mighty while the true sustainers fade into shadow, their legacies preserved only in the echoes of their creations. As the day progresses, the brewers strain the fermented liquid through fine cloths, the process as methodical as the sun's arc across the sky. The resulting beer, thick and nourishing, is stored in clay jars sealed with mud, ready to be distributed to the community. The air around them cools in the late afternoon, carrying a fresh breeze that rustles the reeds and carries the faint, sweet aftertaste of their labor. Sensory details from historical accounts amplify this scene. The slight stickiness on their fingers from the mash, the warmth of the jars against their palms, and the satisfying clink as vessels are set aside. In Giza's worker settlements, as revealed by excavations, brewing was a communal endeavor, fostering a sense of shared purpose that bound people together in harmony. This craft's significance extended far beyond the vats, weaving into the very tapestry of Old Kingdom life. Beer was a dietary staple, providing calories and vitamins in a land where agriculture depended on the annual flood. Archaeological reports from sites like the Giza Plateau highlight how brewers adapted to the environment, using natural fermentation processes that relied on wild yeasts floating in the air, a dance of invisible forces that turned simple ingredients into magic. The brewers themselves, often part of extended families or guilds, passed down their knowledge through demonstration rather than writing, ensuring the tradition endured. There's a calming poetry in this continuity, a subtle wit in how something so ordinary could sustain an empire. As evening descends, the brewers clean their tools with water from the river, the repetitive motions lulling them into a state of contentment. The sky turns a deep indigo, stars emerging like ancient stories waiting to be told, and the air grows crisp, scented with the lingering essence of their day's work. In these quiet moments, one can't help but reflect on the unrecorded names, those shadowy figures whose hands shape the essence of daily life. This mystery, distinct from the tales of pharaohs or grand structures, invites us to appreciate the unseen contributors, their stories preserved in the very beer that flowed through history. And so, as the night deepens over Giza, we prepare to move onward to the next thread in this ancient weave. Perhaps in the following segment, we'll uncover more of the everyday wonders that built this world. For now, let the gentle hum of the past cradle you into peace. In the hushed expanse of Giza's ancient palaces, where the Nile's whisper carried on the breeze like a distant lullaby, Pharaoh Khufu sat upon his throne of polished cedar and gold. Draped in fine linen that rustled softly against his skin, cool as the evening's first breath, he gazed out over the vast plateau where his greatest ambition took shape. The air was thick with the sweet scent of burning myrrh and frankincense, curling upward from braziers that flickered like stars in the dim hall, a gentle haze that softened the edges of the world. It was the fourth decade of his reign, around the year 2580 BCE, and the sun hung low, casting long shadows over the limestone blocks being hauled into place for what would become the mightiest pyramid the world had ever known. Khufu, a man of unyielding vision yet tempered by the quiet wisdom of age, wore his authority like the linen kilt that wrapped his frame simple, elegant, and enduring. His fingers, calloused from the rare occasions he inspected the quarries himself, traced the edges of a papyrus scroll unfurled before him, its edges whispering as they caught the faint stir of air. The document detailed the precise alignment of the pyramid's chambers, drawn from inscriptions etched by scribes who consulted the stars and the sacred texts of old. In those moments, amid the palace's cool stone walls adorned with murals of lotus blooms and reed boats, he contemplated the legacy he would leave, not through conquest, but through stone and shadow. The construction site sprawled beyond the palace gates, a symphony of measured rhythm that unfolded under the watchful eye of overseers. Workers, their bodies glistening with sweat under the midday sun, moved in harmonious waves, the creak of wooden levers and the soft thud of ropes against stone blending into a soothing cadence. Khufu often ventured to the edge of his balcony, the warm breeze carrying the faint, earthy aroma of freshly cut granite from the distant Aswan quarries, mingled with the salty tang of laborers' midday meals of bread and fish. From there he observed the Great Pyramid rising, block by massive block, each one a testament to his dream of eternity. The air hummed with the low chants of the workmen, their voices rising and falling like the Nile's gentle flood, a melody that spoke of unity and purpose without the clamor of conflict. In those serene hours, Khufu reflected on the inscriptions from the Old Kingdom's annals, those carved into temple walls and stelae that spoke of divine order and cosmic balance. He drew inspiration from the pyramid texts, ancient writings that promised the pharaoh's soul would ascend to the stars, preserved in stone as the gods intended. The pyramid was more than a tomb. It was a gateway, a colossal edifice that aligned with the heavens, its sides sloping gently toward the pole star. As he oversaw the work, the scent of heated limestone baking in the sun wafted through the palace, a warm, comforting fragrance that evoked the earth's own breath. His linen garments, light as a sigh, shifted with each movement, reminding him of the fragility of life against the permanence he sought to build. Yet even in this pursuit of immortality, a subtle mystery lingered, like a shadow playing across the palace floors at dusk. The lost records of the pyramid's full design, whispered about in the scribes' chambers, added a layer of intrigue to Khufu's reign. These documents, perhaps detailing the exact rituals or hidden chambers, had vanished from the archives, leaving only fragments etched into lesser stelae. One evening, as the incense smoke curled lazily around him, Khufu pondered this enigma, his voice a soft murmur to his chief advisor. What secrets have the sands claimed? He might have mused, his words carrying a hint of wry amusement at the caprices of time. The mystery endured, untouched by the palace's daily rhythms, a quiet puzzle that enriched the narrative of his rule without marring its tranquility. The palace itself was a haven of sensory delight, its halls lined with alabaster columns that glowed softly in the lamplight, the faint rustle of palm fronds outside harmonizing with the distant calls of ibis birds. Khufu, in his linen robes embroidered with subtle gold threads that caught the light like fleeting stars, often walked these corridors at dawn, the cool stone beneath his feet grounding him in the present. He would pause to examine models of the pyramid, crafted from cedar and obsidian, their surfaces smooth and cool to the touch, evoking the precision of the architects who consulted ancient inscriptions for guidance. These models, born from the workshops where artisans hammered gold and carved ivory, represented the culmination of generations of knowledge, a legacy Khufu expanded upon with quiet determination. As the years progressed, from 2589 BCE, when he ascended the throne, the pyramid's construction became a canvas for his architectural genius. Workers from across the Nile Valley converged, their tools copper chisels and wooden mallets producing a steady, lullaby-like rhythm that echoed through the air. The scent of fresh mortar, a earthy blend of Nile mud and lime, mingled with the aromatic oils rubbed into Khufu's skin during his daily ablutions, creating an atmosphere of serene productivity. He ensured that the laborers were treated with fairness, their rations of beer and bread distributed under the watchful eyes of scribes, who recorded every detail on papyrus sheets that crackled softly when handled. This attention to detail, drawn from the Old Kingdom's principles of Ma'at balance and harmony, prevented unrest and fostered a sense of shared endeavor. In the evenings, as the pyramid's silhouette darkened against the twilight sky, Khufu retreated to his private chambers, where the air was perfumed with jasmine and myrrh. He would recline on cushions of soft linen, the fabric yielding gently under his weight, and dictate notes to his scribes about the day's progress. These sessions were marked by a subtle wit, as he quipped about the stubbornness of stone or the way the sun seemed to conspire with his builders. Even Ra himself pauses to admire our work, he might say with a faint smile, his words floating like the incense smoke that enveloped the room. Yet beneath this levity lay a deeper contemplation of the lost records, those elusive scrolls that might have revealed the pyramid's innermost secrets, perhaps hidden passages or celestial alignments now shrouded in mystery. This enigma, distinct from other tales of the era, added a poetic depth to Khufu's story. While some speculated that the records were buried with forgotten priests or lost to the Nile's floods, Khufu viewed it as a natural veil, a reminder that not all knowledge need be unveiled. The palace gardens, with their blooming lotuses and the gentle splash of fountains, provided a peaceful backdrop for such reflections, the water's murmur blending with the rustle of leaves in the wind. Sensory details like the cool touch of water from a ceremonial basin or the warm glow of oil lamps illuminated his thoughts, making the mystery feel less like a loss and more like an eternal whisper. Throughout his reign, which spanned until 2566 BCE, Khufu's focus remained on this monumental project, drawing from inscriptions in the Abydos king list and the Palermo stone to ensure accuracy and divine favor. The pyramid's causeway, stretching like a golden path under the sun, was lined with workers who sang ancient hymns, their voices a soothing balm that carried across the plateau. Khufu, ever in his linen attire, would observe from afar, the fabric's gentle sway mirroring the flow of time itself. He expanded on the traditions of his predecessors, incorporating innovative techniques like the use of copper tools and precise leveling methods, all while maintaining the Old Kingdom's emphasis on harmony with the cosmos. As the structure neared completion, the air around Giza grew thick with a sense of accomplishment, the scent of fresh paint from the inner chambers mingling with the earth's rich soil. Khufu knew that his legacy would endure, a beacon of human ingenuity that outshone the transient glories of war. In quiet moments he allowed himself a subtle smile at the irony, that a king could conquer time itself through stone, while the lost records remained a gentle enigma, inviting future generations to ponder. And so, as the stars began to twinkle above the pyramid's peak, casting a soft glow over the palaces, Khufu's era drew toward its close, a tranquil chapter in Egypt's grand tapestry, whispering of wonders yet to be fully uncovered. The night breeze carried the faint promise of what lay ahead, a seamless transition to the stories that would follow in the dawn's light. In the hushed twilight of the 26th century BCE, as the golden sands of Giza settled under a vast star-flecked sky, the ancient temples stood like silent guardians, their limestone walls whispering secrets to the cooling air. Within the dim chambers of these sacred halls, a group of scribes gathered, their simple kilts of linen swaying gently with each measured breath. The world outside faded into a soft hum, the distant call of the Nile's waters, the faint rustle of palm fronds in the evening breeze, while inside, the air grew thick with the earthy scent of papyrus and ink, a fragrance that lingered like a forgotten dream. These scribes, their faces etched with the quiet lines of dedication, sat cross-legged on cool stone floors, their reed pens poised over sheets of the pale, fibrous material. Each stroke was deliberate, a rhythmic scratching that echoed softly through the temple, like the gentle patter of rain on river reeds. The sound was soothing, a lullaby of creation amid the shadows, as if the very act of writing wove a tapestry of eternity. One might imagine the ink dark and viscous, pooling on the quill's tip before flowing onto the papyrus, releasing a faint, metallic tang that mingled with the temple's musty aroma. The scribes worked by the flickering light of oil lamps, their flames dancing lazily, casting warm glows that softened the edges of the room and painted golden hues on their sun-kissed skin. In those serene moments, the purpose of their labor unfolded like a river's gentle current, carrying the weight of an empire's memory. These records, meticulously inscribed, served as the backbone of the Old Kingdom's administrative might, chronicling the intricate details of pyramid construction and the offerings that sustained the divine order. According to the archaeological reports from sites like the Giza Plateau, such documents detailed inventories of stone blocks, rations for workers, and rituals to appease the gods, ensuring that the pharaoh's eternal home rose not by chance but by precise design. The scribes, trained from youth in the art of hieroglyphs, transformed spoken words into enduring symbols, their hands moving with a wit as subtle as the wind's whisper, for what could be more clever than capturing the fleeting present in ink that might outlast the stars? Yet as the night deepened, the air grew heavier with an unspoken mystery, a veil of uncertainty that wrapped around these fragile pages like the temple's enveloping shadows. The lost pyramid records, those elusive treasures of the past, have puzzled scholars for centuries, their absence a quiet enigma amid the ruins. In the cool embrace of the temple, one could almost feel the papyrus crinkle under fingertips that never touched it, the ink's residue lingering in the imagination like a half-remembered scent. What became of these documents, once so vital to the kingdom's soul? Did they crumble in the relentless march of time, or were they deliberately hidden, buried beneath the sands to protect sacred knowledge from prying eyes? The archaeological evidence, drawn from Old Kingdom sites such as the mastabas and the Great Pyramids themselves, hints at a deliberate archiving system, where scribes might have stored rolls in sealed jars or niches, only for the desert's whims to claim them. Imagine, if you will, the scribes pausing for a moment, their reeds hovering as the lamp's flame flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced like playful spirits on the walls. The air, heavy with the Inkai residue, carried a subtle wit in its stillness. What folly it was for mortals to believe their words could defy oblivion. These records, after all, were not mere lists. They were lifelines to the divine, documenting the precise measurements of pyramid shafts, the quantities of grain offered to workers, and the incantations meant to guide the pharaoh's ka through the afterlife. Yet the unknowns persist, as reports from excavations at Giza reveal fragments, torn edges of papyrus, faded glyphs that tease at stories never fully told. Why, for instance, do we find so few complete texts from this era, when the Old Kingdom's bureaucracy was at its zenith? Perhaps the Nile's floods, with their soothing rush and inevitable retreat, swept away caches hidden along the riverbanks, leaving only the echo of lost knowledge in the wind's soft sigh. As the scribes continued their work, the temple's atmosphere enveloped them in a cocoon of calm, the scratching of reeds a steady rhythm that lulled the mind into contemplation. One scribe, his kilt folded neatly around him, might have dipped his pen into a clay pot of ink, the liquid's cool viscosity seeping into the reed's fibers, releasing a faint, earthy aroma that blended with the stone's ancient dust. The air felt alive with these sensations, a tapestry of touch and scent that whispered of continuity amid the mystery. Historical accounts, pieced together from Old Kingdom artifacts, suggest that such records also tracked the movements of celestial bodies, aligning the pyramids with the stars in a dance of cosmic precision. But what of the gaps? The absence of comprehensive archives raises questions that drift like mist over the pyramids. Were these documents destroyed in palace intrigues, or did they simply decay, their secrets dissolving into the desert's vast embrace? In the quiet hours, as the scribes' shadows lengthened, one could sense the subtle wit in their endeavor, a gentle irony in striving to preserve what time so easily erases. The purposes of these records extended beyond the mundane. They were offerings to Maat, the goddess of truth and order, ensuring that the pharaoh's legacy remained balanced against the chaos of the unknown. Archaeological reports from the period, such as those examining the debris around the Great Sphinx or the subsidiary pyramids, uncover hints of administrative papyri that detailed labor allocations and resource management, yet these fragments only deepen the enigma. Why have so many vanished without trace? Perhaps the very materials papyrus, so delicate under the sun's gaze, succumbed to the elements, their Inkai lines fading like dreams upon waking. Or maybe, in a detached reflection of human frailty, they were lost to the sand's shifting tides, a consequence of neglect rather than intent, leaving us to ponder the impermanence of all things. The temple air, now cool and still, carried the faint whisper of history's breath, inviting a deeper immersion into the sensory world of these ancient custodians. The scribes' kilts, woven from the finest flax, brushed against their legs with a soft linen rustle, while the papyrus under their hands felt smooth yet textured, like the skin of a river stone polished by time. Each dip into the ink pot evoked a fresh wave of scent, a blend of charred resin and waterweed essence, grounding the mind in the present even as it evoked the past. Historical examples from Old Kingdom sites, such as the administrative papyri found in nearby tombs, illustrate how these records maintain the flow of society, from tracking Nile floods to allocating offerings for the gods. Yet the mystery endures. What untold stories lie buried, waiting for the sands to part? The loss of these documents, a grim shadow in the annals of time, speaks not of violence but of gentle erosion, the slow unraveling of threads in history's loom. As the night waned, the scribes laid down their reeds, their work a testament to human ingenuity amid the eternal quiet. The Inkai air settled like a comforting blanket, and the scratching sounds faded into silence, leaving only the soft hum of the temple stones. In this calming repose, one might drift into reflection, pondering the purposes that drove these men and the unknowns that still elude us. For in the lost pyramid records, there lies a subtle wit to the universe's design that some mysteries, like the stars above, are meant to guide us onward, even as they remain just out of reach. And as the first light of dawn creeps over the horizon, whispering of new beginnings, another tale emerges from the shadows, ready to unfold in the quiet dance of time. In the fading glow of a Giza sunset, where the Nile's gentle whisper met the cool embrace of stone walls, a noble's villa stood as a haven of quiet splendor. This was the Old Kingdom, the 26th century BCE, an era when the air hummed with the secrets of prosperity and the earth held memories of pharaohs long revered. Here, in this villa nestled among date palms and terraced gardens, life unfolded with the grace of a river's flow, far from the clamor of pyramids or the toil of common crafts. The nobles, draped in the finest linen woven from the valley's flax, gathered in vast courtyards where shadows danced and time seemed to pause. The courtyard itself was a masterpiece of symmetry, its polished limestone floors reflecting the warm hues of the setting sun. Columns carved with lotus motifs rose like silent guardians, their surfaces etched with hieroglyphs that spoke of harvests and divine favor. At its center, a fountain trickled softly, its water drawn from underground channels that kept the air fresh and cool, a subtle luxury in the day's lingering heat. The nobles reclined on low stools padded with cushions of dyed wool, their garments light as whispers against their skin, the linens weaved so fine it gleamed like moonlit silk. As evening deepened, the air filled with the aroma of roasted duck and barley bread, mingled with the sweet tang of dates and figs. Servants moved with practiced elegance, their sandaled feet barely disturbing the dust, carrying trays laden with delicacies. The wine, a deep red from the Delta vineyards, poured into alabaster cups with a sound like distant rain, its earthy scent rising to tease the senses. One might imagine the noble at the head of the gathering, a man of middle years with kohl-lined eyes and a shaved head adorned with a simple gold band, raising his cup in a toast that echoed through the open space. His voice, soft and measured, carried a hint of wit, perhaps remarking on the day's mild breeze as if it were a playful companion. "Ah, this wind from the west," he might say with a faint smile, "it carries the scent of the river, as if the gods themselves are joining our feast." The opulence was everywhere, woven into the very fabric of daily life. Lamps of faience and bronze flickered to life as dusk settled, their flames casting a golden haze that softened the edges of reality. The light played across murals on the walls, depicting scenes of bountiful Nile floods and offerings to unseen deities, their colors still vivid from the hands of skilled artisans. Each detail spoke of wealth accumulated through generations, ivory combs left on ebony tables, beads of lapis lazuli strung into necklaces that caught the lamplight like stars. The nobles dined not in haste, but with deliberate savor, their fingers brushing against cool stone platters as they selected morsels of honeyed quail or spiced lentils. The courtyard's air was alive with subtle sounds, the rustle of linen in the breeze, the occasional murmur of conversation, and the distant call of a nightingale from the gardens beyond. In these moments, life in the villa felt eternal, a rhythm as steady as the sun's arc. The women of the household, equally resplendent in their pleated dresses and gold collars, oversaw the arrangements with a quiet authority, their laughter a soft undercurrent to the evening's calm. One might picture a young noblewoman, her wrists heavy with bracelets of carnelian, leaning to adjust a flower arrangement of papyrus and lotus, the petals releasing a faint, floral perfume that mingled with the wine's bouquet. The senses were indulged at every turn, the cool touch of stone beneath bare feet, the warmth of the lamp's glow on skin, the rich flavors that lingered on the tongue long after the meal had passed. Yet beneath this veneer of tranquility, a mystery lingered, as elusive as the shadows that lengthened across the courtyard. Whispers among the servants spoke of treasures once housed within these walls, gold amulets and statuettes of gods, hidden in secret compartments or buried beneath the villa's foundations. These relics, said to have been amassed by the nobles' ancestors, vanished without trace during a time of unrest, perhaps when raiders from the eastern deserts crept close under cover of night. No one dared speak of it openly, for the loss was a shadow on the family's legacy, a puzzle that the Nile's waters seemed to guard. The noble himself, in his moments of reflection, might gaze at the flickering lamps and wonder if the treasures still lay hidden, waiting for a sign from the gods to reveal themselves. It was a gentle enigma, one that added a layer of intrigue to the opulence, like a half-forgotten dream that colored the air with possibility. As the night progressed, the villa's inhabitants retired to their chambers, where beds of woven reeds and linen sheets awaited, cooled by the evening air. The lamps dimmed, their flames dancing one last time before settling into a steady glow, and the courtyard fell into a peaceful hush. Here in this sanctuary, the world outside the vast pyramids and the labors of the many seemed a distant echo. Life was a tapestry of small luxuries, each thread carefully placed. The scent of myrrh incense wafting from braziers, the feel of smooth alabaster against one's palm, the taste of mint-infused water drawn from the villa's well. Even the stars above, peering through the date palms, appeared to nod in approval, their light a soft lull over the scene. One could imagine the noble, after the others had withdrawn, lingering alone in the courtyard, his thoughts drifting like the smoke from a dying lamp. He might recall tales from excavation reports of similar villas uncovered in the sands, where artifacts spoke of lives much like his own elaborate jewelry and ceremonial vessels that hinted at a world of refinement. In one such report from the digs near Saqqara, fragments of painted plaster revealed feasts not unlike this one, with nobles in linen finery sharing wine under open skies. These historical echoes added depth to his evenings, a subtle wit in the face of time's passage, as if the past were a wise companion offering quiet counsel. The mystery of the lost treasures, however, remained a constant undercurrent, a story passed in hushed tones among the household. Perhaps some speculated the items had been spirited away by loyal servants during a flood that once swelled the Nile, their whereabouts marked only by faint inscriptions on the villa's walls. Or maybe they rested undisturbed in hidden vaults, their discovery a test of fate. This uncertainty lent a poetic grace to the nights, a reminder that even in opulence, the world held its secrets, unfolding them only to those who listened closely. As the hours waned and the first hints of dawn brushed the horizon, the villa settled into repose. The stone courtyards still echoing with the faint aroma of wine and the memory of laughter, prepared for another day. Yet as one chapter of this ancient life drew to a close, thoughts turned inevitably outward, toward the broader tapestry of Egypt's wonders, where other stories awaited in the morning light. In the soft glow of dawn over ancient Giza, where the Nile's gentle murmur blended with the distant hum of the plateau, the brewers of the 26th century BCE began their quiet rituals. Clad in simple linen kilts that whispered against their sun-warmed skin, these artisans moved through their workshops with a rhythm as old as the river itself. The air carried the earthy scent of barley dust, fine and lingering, while the first rays painted the mud brick walls in hues of pale gold. Here in the shadow of rising pyramids, life unfolded not in grand epics but in the steady repetition of tasks, each one a thread in the fabric of daily existence. The brewers rose with the sun, their bodies attuned to its cycle, though no scroll or tablet ever fully captured the nuances of their hours. One might imagine them stirring from reed mats in modest homes along the riverbank, the cool stone floors grounding their bare feet as they shook off the remnants of dreams. With a subtle wit born of routine, they might have chuckled at the way the morning light played tricks, turning the storage jars into silent guardians of their craft. No bells or horns marked the start, only the soft rustle of kilts being tied, and the faint, comforting aroma of yesterday's mash wafting from the workshops nearby. They gathered their tools, wooden paddles smoothed by years of use, clay pots etched with faint hieroglyphs, and made their way through the awakening streets, where the air grew thick with the promise of fermentation. In the workshops, nestled among clusters of date palms and low-roofed structures, the brewers set to their first tasks. The space was alive with sensory whispers. The dusty barley piled in corners, its grains catching the light like tiny stars, released a warm, nutty scent that filled the room and settled on the skin like a familiar embrace. They began by sorting the harvest, hands sifting through heaps with careful precision, fingers brushing away chaff that floated lazily in the air. One brewer, perhaps named Kaimwesit after the fashion of the time, would kneel by a large vat, his kilt hiked slightly to avoid the damp earth, and pour in measured scoops of emmer wheat soaked from the night before. The water, drawn fresh from the Nile, held a cool, mineral tang, and as it met the grains, a soft hissing sound emerged, like a distant whisper from the gods. As the day warmed, the stirring commenced, a meditative act that defined their labor. Leaning over the vat's vast clay vessels buried partially in the ground, the brewers plunged their paddles into the mixture, creating gentle whirlpools that bubbled and sighed. The liquid churned with a rhythmic gurgle, releasing vapors that danced in the heat, carrying notes of sweet malt and a hint of tartness that promised the beer to come. One could almost hear the subtle wit in their movements, the way a brewer might pause to wipe sweat from his brow and murmur, "The gods demand patience, but my arms grow weary first." The kilts, light and breathable, swayed with each motion, their fabric brushing against legs dusted with flowery residue, a tactile reminder of the day's work. Around them the workshop hummed with life. The faint crackle of drying herbs hung from rafters, the occasional drip of condensation from the vat lids, and the distant bleat of goats outside, all weaving into a lullaby of industry. Midday brought a brief respite, though the schedules of these artisans remained veiled in mystery, their exact timings lost to the sands of time. Unlike the scribes who etched their days into stone, the brewers' routines were oral traditions, passed in murmurs that faded with each generation. One wonders in a calming reflection, if they ever pondered this enigma themselves, how their labor, so vital to feasts and offerings, left no precise record of when they paused for bread and beer. Perhaps it was then, under the high sun, that they gathered in a shaded corner, sharing flatbreads smeared with honey and dates, the sticky sweetness lingering on their lips as they exchanged quiet stories. The air grew heavy with the scent of midday heat mingling with fermenting mash, a comforting blanket that slowed the pulse and invited rest. A brewer might lean against a wall, feeling the cool clay through his kilt, and gaze at the horizon, where the pyramids stood as silent witnesses to their unchronicled lives. Returning to the vats, the process deepened, each step a dance of transformation. They added date syrup or herbs, their hands moving with the assurance of long practice, and stirred once more. The mixture bubbled lazily, its surface rippling like the Nile's eddies, and the workshop filled with a symphony of sounds. The soft slosh of liquid, the occasional pop of gas escaping, and the rhythmic thump of paddles against clay. Sensory details abounded, the warmth of steam rising to kiss their faces, the gritty texture of grains underfoot, the faint bitterness that hinted at the beer's eventual flavor. In these moments the brewers embodied a subtle wit, perhaps joking about how the beer seemed to brew itself if left alone too long, their voices low and soothing, like a lullaby carried on the breeze. As afternoon waned, the mystery of their unrecorded schedules wove through their actions, an unspoken thread that added a layer of intrigue to the ordinary. Historians, drawing from Old Kingdom records like the depictions in tomb reliefs at Saqqara, note that brewing was a communal art, yet the precise flow of hours eludes us. Were they guided by the sun's arc, or by the feel of the mash reaching just the right warmth? One might expand on this, imagining a brewer testing the liquid with a sip, its yeasty tang coating the tongue, and nodding in silent approval before continuing. The kilts, now damp with sweat and splashed droplets, clung gently, a second skin that spoke of dedication. Around them the workshop's shadows lengthened, casting a golden hue over the vats, and the air grew richer with the evolving scent of fermentation, a heady mix that promised sustenance and joy. Evening approached with the same gentle pace, the brewers transferring the brew to storage jars, their movements deliberate and fluid. They sealed the vessels with mud caps, ensuring the beer would mature under the cool night air, and wiped their hands on their kilts, leaving faint streaks of residue. The day's end brought a quiet satisfaction, the mystery of their routines lingering like the last light of day. Perhaps in those final moments they reflected on how their work sustained the living and the dead, a cycle as eternal as the Nile's flow, yet forever partially hidden from view. As the stars began to twinkle above Giza, the brewers retired, their kilts folded neatly, ready for another dawn. The workshops fell silent, save for the soft bubbling of vats left to their own devices, a reminder of the artistry that continued unseen. And so, from this glimpse into their world, we turn gently to the next thread of history, where other mysteries await. In the hushed dawn of Giza, where the great pyramids stood as silent guardians over the Nile's fertile embrace, the ancient brewers began their rhythmic work. It was the 26th century BCE, a time when the Old Kingdom's sun-baked earth whispered of mysteries long buried in the sands. Amid the modest workshops near the river's edge, men clad in simple linen kilts moved with a steady grace, their bare arms glistening under the rising sun as they tended to vast clay vats. The air carried a soft, yeasty warmth, like a gentle breath from the gods themselves, inviting one to linger in the quiet ritual of transformation. These brewers, sturdy figures etched by years of labor, approached their craft with the reverence of a lullaby sung to the harvest. They drew from the wisdom of their ancestors, knowledge gleaned from fragments of Old Kingdom artifacts, pottery shards inscribed with faint hieroglyphs, and the remnants of granaries unearthed in places like the Giza Plateau. One such find, a broken vessel from a nearby tomb, hinted at the careful balance they maintained, though much of it remained shrouded in the enigma of unrecorded methods. How had they first coaxed the wild yeasts from the air, or selected the perfect grains to ferment under the desert stars? It was a puzzle that time had not fully solved, a subtle wit in the universe's design, leaving modern seekers to ponder the invisible threads that bound the living to the ancient. As the brewers stirred the mixtures, their wooden paddles dipped into the vats with a soft, rhythmic splash, echoing like distant waves on the Nile. The liquid inside bubbled faintly, a fizzing whisper that promised life from the mundane barley and emmer wheat, soaked and ground into a paste that now simmered in the warmth. The yeasty air grew thick, carrying notes of earthy sweetness and a faint tang, as if the very essence of the floodplain had been captured and coaxed into something greater. One could almost feel the heat rising from the vessels, a comforting embrace against the cool morning breeze, while the sun's golden light painted the scene in soft hues, turning the brewers' shadows into elongated dances across the packed earth. In those days, fermentation was not merely a task but a sacred art, drawn from the Old Kingdom's archaeological echoes. Excavations at sites like the Giza necropolis revealed storage jars, their interiors stained with residues that spoke of careful processes, perhaps involving the addition of date fruits or herbs to enhance the brew. The brewers, with their kilts tied neatly at the waist, would scoop handfuls of yeast gathered from previous batches or coaxed from the wild into the vats, mixing it methodically. Their movements were deliberate, almost meditative, as if each stir unlocked a piece of the world's hidden harmony. The mystery lay in the unrecorded nuances. How did they know precisely when to let the mixture rest, or how to harness the invisible forces that turned sweet mash into frothy beer? These secrets, never etched fully into stone or papyrus, added a layer of gentle intrigue, like a story half told in the flickering torchlight of an evening tale. The vats themselves were humble yet profound, large earthenware pots buried partially in the ground to maintain a steady temperature, their rims smoothed by generations of hands. As the brewers leaned over them, the fizzing liquid released a cascade of bubbles, each one a tiny miracle rising to the surface. The air filled with the scent of fermenting grains, a warm, bready aroma mingled with the subtle spice of unknown additives, perhaps wild herbs from the nearby wadis. One brewer, his kilt dusted with flour, paused to inhale deeply, his face softening in quiet satisfaction, as if the process itself were a soothing melody. The sun climbed higher, casting a golden filter over the scene, and the distant hum of the river provided a backdrop, its waters flowing as endlessly as the traditions these men upheld. Yet woven into this calming rhythm was the enigma of innovation. Archaeological evidence from Old Kingdom sites, such as the beer-making tools found in the tombs of Saqqara, suggested that these techniques had evolved over centuries, but the exact methods remained elusive. How had the brewers in Giza adapted to the arid climate, ensuring that their yeasts thrived despite the heat? It was as if the air itself held secrets, carrying microscopic wonders on the wind, waiting for skilled hands to capture them. The brewers worked in pairs, one man pouring water from clay jugs while the other stirred, their kilts swaying gently with each motion. The liquid surface rippled and foamed, releasing a soft hissing sound, like whispers exchanged between the earth and the sky. This unrecorded mystery lent a subtle wit to their labor, a reminder that not all knowledge need be proclaimed. Some truths fermented quietly, revealed only in the taste of the final brew. As midday approached, the brewers took a moment to rest, their bodies eased by the shade of palm fronds. The yeasty air lingered, now laced with the earthy undertones of the vats, and the fizzing continued unabated, a persistent murmur that spoke of patience and time. They might have shared a quiet word or two, their voices low and measured, discussing the subtle variations in each batch, perhaps a hint of honey added here, or a different strain of yeast there, drawn from observations passed down through oral traditions. These details, absent from the hieroglyphs that adorned the pyramids, formed the core of the mystery. How had they refined their craft without written records, relying instead on the senses and the seasons? The Old Kingdom's finds, like the model breweries depicted in tomb reliefs, offered glimpses, but left room for wonder, a calming puzzle that invited reflection rather than urgency. In the afternoon light, the brewers returned to their tasks, their kilts now damp with perspiration, as they strained the fermenting liquid through fine meshed sieves. The process was gentle, almost tender, with each drop symbolizing the transformation from raw grain to nourishing drink. Sensory details abounded, the cool slip of the liquid through their fingers, the warm rush of air as they uncovered the vats, and the faint, sweet acidity that promised a beverage both sustaining and serene. The mystery deepened with each step, for while artifacts like those from the Giza excavations showed the tools stirring rods and storage amphorae, they could not capture the intangible. The brewer's intuition, the way they sensed when the fermentation had reached its peak, perhaps by the sound of the bubbles or the scent's subtle shift. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of soft amber and rose, the brewers prepared to seal their vats. The yeasty air softened, blending with the cooling breeze, and the fizzing quieted to a gentle sigh. This was the heart of their art, a process rooted in the Old Kingdom's legacy, yet veiled in unrecorded wisdom. How many generations had perfected these techniques, adapting to the Nile's rhythms and the desert's whims? It was a mystery that added a layer of subtle charm, like a lullaby's refrain that lingers just beyond full understanding. And so, as the stars emerged over Giza, the brewers stepped back, their work complete for the day. The vats stood as silent sentinels, their contents continuing to transform in the night. This gentle exploration of fermentation techniques, drawn from the sands of time, now fades like the day's last light, leading us toward the next whisper of ancient wonders. In the hushed workshops of ancient Giza, where the sun dipped low over the Nile's distant curve, the brewers moved with a rhythm as old as the stones beneath their feet. It was the 26th century BCE, a time when the Old Kingdom's artisans tended to their crafts with quiet reverence, far from the clamor of pyramids rising in the distance. Here in these dim, earthen rooms lined with shelves of clay and stone, a group of brewers gathered for the sacred task of tool maintenance, their simple kilts swaying gently with each deliberate motion. The air carried a faint whisper of dust, stirred by the day's fading light, as they prepared to care for the vessels that had served generations. One brewer, his name lost to the sands like so many others, knelt beside a massive vat of carved limestone, its surface etched with faint patterns from years of use. He wore a kilt of coarse linen, tied loosely at the waist, the fabric softened by sweat and time. His hands, calloused yet steady, gripped a bundle of reeds bundled into a makeshift brush, the fibers worn smooth from countless scrubbings. As he began, the workshop filled with the soft, rhythmic scrape of stone against stone, a sound like distant waves lapping at the riverbank, calming in its repetition. The vat, broad and deep, held the memory of past labors, its inner walls stained with residues that spoke of bygone efforts, though no one spoke of the brewing itself that was for another time. Around him, others worked in companionable silence, their movements a dance of maintenance that bound them to their ancestors. A younger man, his kilt hitched up slightly to avoid the dust, leaned over a row of smaller stone basins, each one chipped from the quarries of the eastern desert. He dipped a cloth woven from palm fibers into a basin of water drawn from a nearby well, the liquid cool and clear, carrying a faint mineral tang that lingered in the air. As he wrung the cloth, droplets fell with a gentle patter, like rain on parched earth, and he pressed it against the basin's rim, rubbing in slow circles. The stone yielded reluctantly, grains of embedded dirt loosening under his touch, releasing a whisper of earthy scent that mingled with the workshop's warm, dry atmosphere. The brewers knew these tools as extensions of their own hands, crafted in forms that had evolved over centuries, yet always touched by the mystery of what had been forgotten. In those days, the designs of certain implements, perhaps a particular handle shaped for perfect grip, or a vat reinforced with hidden reinforcements, had already begun to fade from memory, lost to the passage of time and the impermanence of oral traditions. Archaeologists from later ages, sifting through the ruins of Giza, would uncover fragments. A broken reed brush in a tomb at Saqqara, its fibers still intact after millennia, or a polished stone tool from the mastabas of the elite, hinting at techniques that no record fully explained. But here in the moment the brewers sensed that shadow, a subtle enigma in the way their tools fit so naturally into their palms, as if guided by hands long turned to dust. One brewer paused to examine a wooden mallet, its handle smoothed by oil from countless grips, the grain of the acacia wood glowing softly in the lamplight. He ran his fingers along its surface, feeling the warmth of the wood, worn to a silky finish that spoke of careful tending. The air around him grew heavy with the scent of aged timber and the faint, musty aroma of stored grains nearby, though he focused only on the mallet's balance, testing its weight with a gentle swing that echoed softly off the workshop walls. "Ah, this one holds its secrets well," he might have murmured to himself, his voice a low hum like a breeze through palm fronds, a touch of wit in the way he noted how the tool seemed almost alive, defying the erosion of years. In another corner, an older woman, her kilt wrapped neatly around her, tended to the pottery jars that lined the shelves. Though the brewers were often men in the tales, records from Giza's old kingdom suggest women shared in such labors, their presence a quiet strength amid the dust. She selected a jar, its clay fired in ovens that mimicked the desert sun, and wiped it with a soft rag of flax, the fabric whispering against the surface like a lover's caress. The jar's exterior, once smooth, now bore faint ridges from use, and as she worked, specks of dust rose in lazy spirals, catching the light from a nearby oil lamp. The lamp's flame flickered gently, casting a warm glow that danced across the room, illuminating the subtle play of shadows on the tools and the brewer's focused expressions. Each stroke of their hands brought forth a symphony of sensations, from the cool, gritty texture of the stone under their fingertips to the dry kiss of air on their skin. The workshop itself was a haven of simplicity, its floors packed earth that released a faint, loamy scent with every step, and its walls adorned with faint murals of tools in use, preserved in fragments that modern excavators would one day piece together. One such find from the Giza Plateau's lesser-known sites revealed a depiction of a brewer polishing a vat, the image faded but evocative, suggesting rituals of care that went beyond mere utility. Yet woven into this routine was the ever-present mystery: why had certain designs vanished? Perhaps a clever notch in a handle, meant to prevent slippage during wet tasks, or an intricate carving that aligned with the stars for auspicious maintenance details that eluded even the most diligent of ancient scribes. As the evening deepened, the brewers continued their work, their kilts brushing against the ground in a soft rustle that blended with the occasional sigh of wind through the workshop's reed mats. One man turned to a set of copper scrapers, tools unearthed in later digs from sites like Abu Roche, their edges still sharp after 4,000 years. He honed one with a stone whetstone, the grating sound a low, soothing murmur, like the Nile's flow in the quiet hours. The scraper's metal caught the light, gleaming with a muted brilliance, and he paused to admire its form, a subtle smile playing on his lips as he wondered at the craftsman's ingenuity, lost now to the ages. Throughout the space, the air thickened with the mingled odors of clean stone and oiled wood, a comforting blanket that wrapped around the workers like a familiar embrace. The dust, fine and pervasive, settled on their skin with a gentle tickle, reminding them of the earth's enduring presence. In these moments, the mystery of the lost designs felt almost palpable, a whisper in the shadows, as if the tools themselves guarded secrets that time had claimed. Fragments from Old Kingdom tombs, such as those at Giza's Western Cemetery, hint at such enigmas: tools buried without explanation, their purposes inferred but never fully known, adding a layer of intrigue to the brewers' quiet labors. Yet amid the calm there was a subtle wit in their approach, a knowing glance shared when a tool revealed an unexpected flaw, as if to say, even the ancients had their oversights. One brewer, wiping a vat's edge, chuckled softly to himself at the way the stone resisted his efforts, its stubbornness a reminder that not all mysteries were meant to be solved. As the task drew to a close, the workshop fell into a deeper tranquility, the tools gleaming faintly in the dimming light, ready for whatever came next. And so, as the stars began to prick the night sky over Giza, the brewers stepped back, their work complete for now. The mystery of those lost designs lingered, a gentle enigma carried on the breeze, inviting reflection rather than resolution. In the quiet that followed, one might imagine a seamless transition to the tales of other crafts, where the rhythm of ancient life continued its eternal flow. In the fading glow of a Giza sunset, where the Nile's gentle murmur blended with the distant hum of village life, a group of ancient Egyptian brewers gathered under the shade of date palms. These men, clad in simple linen kilts that draped loosely over their sun-warmed skin, had spent their days tending to the art of fermentation in mud-brick workshops. Now, as the air cooled and stars began to prick the sky, they came together in the village square, not for labor, but for the quiet rituals of shared sustenance. The scent of baking bread wafted from clay ovens, a soft, yeasty aroma that promised comfort and connection, drawing them into a circle of earthenware bowls and woven mats. Their leader, a sturdy man named Kemet, with hands calloused from stirring mash and a face etched by years under the relentless sun, settled cross-legged on the ground. He wore his kilt with the ease of long familiarity, its edges frayed from the day's work, and motioned for the others to join. Around him sat Pazer the youngest, whose quick smile hid a depth of unspoken thoughts, and Horam, whose broad shoulders spoke of strength earned through shared toils. They were not nobles nor scribes recording the deeds of pharaohs, but ordinary men whose lives, wove into the fabric of Old Kingdom society, as depicted in the modest tomb reliefs and administrative papyri from that era. These records, sparse on personal bonds, hinted at communities like theirs, where brewers formed the backbone of daily provisions, their craft essential yet often overlooked in grander histories. As the first stars emerged, a woman from the village, perhaps a brewer's wife or kin, brought forth a tray of flatbreads, their surfaces sizzling faintly on hot stones, releasing a golden crispness that crackled in the still air. The brewers reached for the warm loaves, their fingers brushing against the rough texture, the heat seeping into their palms like a gentle embrace. Another day turned to dusk, Kemet murmured with a subtle wink, his voice a low rumble that carried the wit of one who had seen seasons come and go, and still, the beer flows as freely as the river. They chuckled softly, the sound blending with the whisper of palm fronds overhead, a light-hearted nod to their trade without delving into the routines that defined their mornings. The meal unfolded with deliberate slowness, each bite savored in the flickering light of oil lamps that cast a warm, amber glow across their faces. Barley porridge, thickened with dates and honey, filled their bowls, its creamy sweetness mingling with the earthy tang of fermented grains they knew so well. The soft chatter rose and fell like the Nile's tide, words exchanged in hushed tones that spoke of harvests past and the simple joys of kin. Pazer tore a piece of bread, its steam rising to tickle his nose with hints of cumin and garlic, and passed it to Horam, who nodded in quiet thanks. In these moments, the bonds among them strengthened, not through grand declarations, but through the unspoken language of shared glances and gestures, much like the communal feasts described in the social annals of the Fifth Dynasty. Yet amid this serene gathering, there lingered a mystery, one that the ancient records of the Old Kingdom never fully captured: the enigma of unwritten friendships. These men, whose names might appear in ledgers as mere laborers, forged connections that transcended the clay tablets and tomb inscriptions. How did Pazer, with his youthful curiosity, come to trust the elder Horam, whose steady presence offered guidance without demand? The papyri from Giza's administrative centers spoke of organized work crews and resource allocations, but they omitted the subtle threads that bound hearts. Perhaps it was in the way Kemet's stories, spun over evening meals, wove tales of the gods and the river's bounty, his voice carrying a lullaby-like rhythm that soothed frayed spirits. Or maybe it was the shared memory of a particularly bountiful brew, its rich, malty flavor still lingering on their tongues, a taste that evoked laughter and camaraderie. As the night deepened, the air grew cooler, carrying the faint scent of lotus flowers from nearby waters, their petals closing in the darkness like secrets held close. The brewers leaned back on their mats, the fabric of their kilts rustling softly against the ground, and spoke of the village's rhythms, the cycle of planting and flooding that mirrored their own lives. Horam, with a wry smile that hinted at hidden depths, recounted a tale from his youth, of a brewer who once traded a jug of ale for a fisherman's catch, forging an alliance that outlasted seasons. It was a story not found in the formal archives, which favored accounts of pyramid construction and royal decrees, but one that illustrated the resilient networks among common folk. The mystery deepened in these exchanges, for how could such profound ties remain unrecorded? In the Old Kingdom, as evidenced by artifacts from sites like the Giza necropolis, social bonds were often implied through offerings and joint burials, yet the personal affections of craftsmen like these brewers slipped into the shadows. Perhaps it was intentional, a quiet resistance to the scribe's focus on hierarchy, or simply the nature of ephemeral emotions, as fleeting as the evening breeze that now stirred the flames of their lamps. The sensory world around them amplified this intrigue: the crackle of bread cooling on the trays, the warm press of shoulders as they sat close, the earthy aroma of the ground beneath them, all weaving an invisible tapestry of connection. One by one, they dipped their fingers into a communal bowl of fig compote, its sticky sweetness coating their tongues with a comforting familiarity, a ritual that echoed the feasting scenes in lesser-known tomb paintings from the era. Kemet, ever the subtle jester, quipped about the god's own brewing habits, imagining Osiris sharing a jug with Ra, his words drawing soft laughs that echoed like distant river waves. These moments, rich with the scent of roasted grains and the gentle touch of night air on their skin, revealed the depth of their community, a bond built not on written words but on the shared essence of survival and joy. As the meal wound down, the brewers sat in companionable silence, the soft chatter fading to the occasional sigh or murmur. The stars above seemed to watch over them, their light reflecting in the eyes of men who knew the value of such gatherings. In the Old Kingdom, historical examples from social records, like the distribution lists from the pyramid builders' towns, showed how workers received rations that fostered group cohesion, yet it was these unwritten friendships that truly sustained them. Pazer gazed at the horizon, perhaps pondering the unseen forces that drew them together, a mystery that lingered like the faint, lingering taste of honey on his lips. In this tranquil village scene, far from the clamor of daily toils or the opulence of noble estates, the brewers embodied the enduring spirit of their time. Their bonds, though unchronicled, formed the quiet undercurrent of society, a testament to human connection in an age of stone and sand. As the night grew heavier, Kemet rose slowly, his kilt swaying with emotion, and bid his companions good rest, his voice a soothing whisper that promised another dawn. And so, with the mystery of their unwritten friendships lingering like a half-forgotten dream, they dispersed into the shadows, leaving only the faint glow of lamps and the echo of shared warmth. Yet as the last embers faded, one might wonder what tales these men carried in their hearts, stories that time would never etch into stone. For in the world of ancient Giza, where the Nile's whisper spoke of continuity, such bonds endured, waiting to transition into the next chapter of life's gentle flow. In the hushed glow of dawn over ancient Giza, where the Nile's gentle murmur blended with the first light caressing the stone temples, a quiet rhythm stirred among the brewers. These artisans, clad in simple linen kilts that whispered against their skin as they moved, carried vessels of golden beer, offerings to the eternal deities who watched from shadowed shrines. The air held a soft reverence, a lullaby of devotion that had echoed through the Old Kingdom for centuries, drawn from the careful inscriptions of temple records at places like the Pyramid of Khufu and the nearby mortuary complexes. Here in the 26th century BCE, the brewers' rituals unfolded like a dream, woven with the scents of fermenting grains and the faint haze of rising incense, each step a tender dance between the mortal and the divine. The brewers rose with the sun, their hands calloused yet graceful from years of tending clay pots and malting barley. They donned their kilts, the white fabric cool against the warming air, tied at the waist with cords that dangled like subtle reminders of their sacred duty. In the dim courtyards of the temples, where columns rose like silent guardians, they prepared their offerings. The beer, a sacred elixir brewed from emmer wheat and date palms, bubbled softly in jars etched with hieroglyphs praising the gods. As they lifted these vessels, the liquid caught the light, shimmering like liquid amber, its earthy aroma mingling with the wisps of myrrh incense that curled lazily through the air. One could almost hear the soft chants, murmurs of ancient words passed down through generations, their tones as soothing as a river's flow, invoking the favor of Hathor, the goddess of joy and fertility, or Osiris, who ruled the afterlife with a benevolent hand. In those quiet moments, the brewers approached the shrines, small alcoves nestled within the temple walls, adorned with offerings of bread and flowers. They moved with deliberate care, their bare feet padding on the cool stone floors, each step echoing faintly in the vast silence. The air grew thick with sensory whispers, the warm, yeasty scent of the beer contrasting with the cool, resinous smoke of burning frankincense, its tendrils twisting upward like playful spirits. A subtle wit lingered in their rituals, for even in their solemnity, the brewers might share a knowing glance, as if to say that the gods, too, appreciated a well-crafted brew after a long eternity. They poured the beer into shallow basins before carved images of the deities, the liquid pooling like a golden mirror reflecting the flickering oil lamps. Soft chants rose then, gentle as a lullaby. Words like Neteru M Pet received this gift of the earth, floating on the breeze, their rhythm steady and calming, designed not to disturb the peace but to weave it deeper into the fabric of the day. Historical accounts from the Old Kingdom temple records, inscribed on the walls of places like the Giza funerary temples, speak of these practices as essential to maintaining harmony between the human world and the divine. The brewers were not mere laborers, they were intermediaries, their craft sanctified by tradition. In one such record from the reign of King Khafre, a relief depicts a brewer in a similar kilt, his arms extended in offering, the beer symbolizing rebirth and sustenance for the gods. Yet amid this structured devotion, a mystery lingered, unwritten in those same records, the unspoken rituals that bound the brewers to their craft. Whispers among the temple scribes suggested hidden gestures, perhaps a secret incantation murmured only in the dead of night, or a particular way of stirring the mash that invoked unseen forces. These elements, never etched into stone for fear of dilution or misuse, added a layer of intrigue, like a faint shadow in the corner of a sunlit room, inviting quiet contemplation rather than bold inquiry. As the morning progressed, the brewers would linger in the shrines, their senses attuned to the subtle world around them. The incense, with its woody undertones, curled around their faces, warming their skin and filling their lungs with a soothing haze that blurred the line between wakefulness and dream. They might close their eyes, feeling the soft vibration of the chants as they resonated through the stone, a gentle hum that evoked the Nile's eternal flow. In these moments, the beer itself became a conduit, its taste a blend of sweet malt and tart fermentation evoking the earth's bounty, offered not out of obligation but with a quiet joy. One could imagine the deities accepting these gifts with a benevolent nod, their stone forms seeming almost alive in the play of light and shadow. The brewers' movements were fluid, almost poetic, as they adjusted the offerings, the fabric of their kilts brushing against the altars with a whisper-soft sound, like leaves in a gentle wind. Yet even in the serene practice, the mystery of the unwritten rituals cast a subtle spell. Temple records from Giza's sacred sites, such as those near the Valley Temple, detailed the public aspects: the pouring, the chanting, the precise measurements of grain, but left gaps for the personal, the intuitive. Perhaps it was a gesture, a finger traced in the air above the beer to ward off unseen impurities, or a silent prayer offered only in the brewer's heart. This enigma, preserved through oral tradition alone, hinted at a deeper wisdom, one that evolved with each generation, adapting to the whims of the gods. It was a mystery that brought a faint smile to the lips of the observant, a witty reminder that not all knowledge need be carved in stone to hold power. In the soft light, as the brewers stepped back from the shrines, their work complete for the moment, one might sense the air shift, as if the deities themselves exhaled in quiet approval. Throughout the day, the rituals continued, each hour bringing new layers of sensory detail. The sun climbed higher, warming the temple stones until they radiated a gentle heat, and the brewers returned to their workshops nearby, where the scent of fresh barley mingled with the distant aroma of baking bread. They would prepare more beer, their kilts now dusted with flour, the fabric soft against their legs as they worked. In the afternoon, they might revisit the shrines for secondary offerings, the beer now cooled by the shade, its surface rippling slightly as they poured, creating patterns that some believed foretold the gods' moods. The chants evolved too, softer in the heat of the day, a lullaby-like cadence that lulled both the offerers and the offered to into a state of peaceful communion. Historical examples from the records, such as those from the tomb of Queen Hedefers, illustrate similar scenes, where brewers' offerings ensured the deceased's journey to the afterlife was smooth, their beer a symbol of eternal nourishment. As evening approached, the rituals took on a more introspective tone. The brewers, their kilts now loosened for comfort, gathered once more at the shrines, the air cooling with the setting sun. Incense was renewed, its smoke drifting in lazy spirals, carrying with it the day's accumulated scents: earthy beer, floral offerings, and the faint tang of stone warmed by daylight. They chanted in hushed voices, the words blending into the twilight, evoking a sense of closure and renewal. Here the mystery deepened. What unwritten rite might they perform as shadows lengthened? A subtle tilt of the head, a breath held just so, or perhaps a drop of beer spilled not by accident but as a deliberate act, symbolizing the cycle of life. These elements, absent from the temple inscriptions, added a layer of allure, a gentle puzzle for the mind to ponder in the fading light. In this way, the brewer's practices wove a tapestry of devotion, rich with sensory threads that calmed the spirit and invited reflection. The Old Kingdom records, with their precise depictions, grounded these rituals in history, yet the unwritten mysteries infused them with an enduring charm. As the night fell over Giza, the brewers departed the shrines, their duties fulfilled, leaving the deities to their eternal vigil. And in the quiet that followed, one might wonder what secrets the morrow would reveal, as the story of ancient Egypt's heart continued to unfold. In the soft glow of a Giza dawn, where the Nile's gentle whisper met the ancient village's mud-brick homes, the brewers moved with a rhythm as old as the river itself. Clad in simple kilts of linen that brushed against their sun-warmed skin, these men and women tended to their craft, their hands deftly crushing herbs under the vast, unchanging sky. The air carried a faint, earthy scent of barley and mint, mingling with the dusty haze that settled over the narrow paths, inviting a quiet contemplation of days long past. These brewers, guardians of fermented elixirs, knew well the delicate balance between creation and well-being. In the 26th century BCE, during the Old Kingdom's serene expanse, their health practices drew from the wisdom etched in papyrus scrolls, texts like fragments of the Ebers papyrus that whispered of nature's remedies. They gathered herbs not merely for flavor, but for their healing virtues, a knowledge passed through generations like a gentle current. As they worked in the shade of palm fronds, the steam from boiling pots rose in lazy tendrils, carrying the sharp, invigorating aroma of fennel and coriander, a soothing balm that eased the strain of their labors. Imagine the scene: a brewer, his kilt tied loosely at the waist, kneeling by a low fire where a clay vessel simmered. The flames danced with a hypnotic flicker, casting warm light on his weathered face, and the air grew thick with the herbal infusion's essence. Thyme and garlic, staples from the fertile fields, were ground into pastes, their pungent oils releasing a fragrance that lingered like a distant memory. These practices, rooted in the medical lore of the time, aimed to ward off the ailments that plagued those who toiled in the heat. A simple infusion of honey and chamomile, drawn from the Ebers texts, soothed throats irritated by the day's dust, its sweetness coating the tongue in a comforting embrace. Yet amid this tranquility, there was an undercurrent of mystery, a subtle enigma that wove through the brewers' routines like a hidden thread. Legends spoke of lost remedy recipes, formulas perfected in secret by masters of old, their ingredients scrawled in fading hieroglyphs that time had claimed. One such tale, murmured in the evening gatherings, revolved around a brewer named Kamwesit, whose blend of rare desert herbs and Nile lotus was said to cure the deepest fatigue. But the recipe vanished with him, perhaps buried in an unmarked chamber or carried away by the wind, leaving only echoes in the minds of those who remembered. This loss, while poignant, served as a gentle reminder of life's impermanence, a witless jest from the gods that even the most cherished knowledge might slip into obscurity. The brewers approached their health with a mindful grace, drawing from the natural world that surrounded their villages. In the cool hours before the sun climbed high, they would walk the outskirts, gathering wild rosemary and marjoram, their leaves crisp under fingertips, the plant's oils leaving a faint, resinous trace on the skin. These herbs, documented in Old Kingdom texts as balancers of the body's humors, were infused into their brews to prevent the maladies that could arise from long hours bent over vats. The steam rising from the mixtures enveloped them in a warm, enveloping cloud, its moisture clinging to their faces like a soft kiss, easing the dryness of the arid air. Sensory details abound in these practices, each one a thread in the tapestry of daily life. The dusty earth underfoot released a fine powder with every step, a tactile reminder of the land's ancient bounty, while the distant hum of insects provided a lullaby-like backdrop. When they applied poultices of crushed cumin and onion to soothe minor aches, the sharp, spicy scent filled the air, mingling with the sweeter notes of dates and figs used in tonics. These remedies, as per the Kahan papyrus, were not mere palliatives but holistic rituals, promoting vitality through harmony with the elements. Subtle wit colored their methods, for even in seriousness, there was a lightness to their lore. One might chuckle softly at the idea of a humble garlic clove, its pungent bite warding off unseen foes, as if the earth itself played a clever game. The brewers knew that overindulgence in their potent creations could lead to discomfort, a detached observation of consequences rather than alarm. In the text, such imbalances were noted with clinical poise, focusing on restoration rather than blame, guiding one back to equilibrium with the aid of basil's calming vapors or the grounding essence of sage. As the day waned, the brewers gathered in communal spaces, sharing knowledge under the fading light. Here, the mystery of the lost recipes took on a dreamlike quality, stories unfolding like a gentle narrative. Perhaps Kamwesit's secret involved the rare blue lotus, its petals yielding a serene fragrance that eased the mind, or a blend of river reeds and desert resins that history had swallowed whole. These tales, while evoking a quiet sorrow, carried a soothing rhythm, reminding all that some wisdom remains just beyond reach, an eternal whisper in the wind. To maintain their vigor, the brewers incorporated preventive measures, drawing from the Eber's Papyrus's counsel on daily infusions. A morning draught of steeped anise and coriander seeds, with their warm, licorice-like taste, was believed to fortify the spirit against the day's toll. The liquid's texture, smooth and slightly viscous, slid down the throat with a comforting warmth, while the herb's flavors danced on the palate, a subtle interplay of bitter and sweet. This practice, simple yet profound, embodied the Old Kingdom's philosophy of balance, where health was not a battle, but a gentle alignment with nature's flow. In the villages of Giza, the air often carried the mingled scents of ongoing preparations, the earthy tang of fermenting grains, the fresh burst of mint leaves being torn, and the subtle smokiness of smoldering herbs in clay burners. These elements created a sensory symphony, one that lulled the mind into a state of peaceful reflection. The brewers, with their kilts swaying in the breeze, embodied this harmony, their health practices a testament to an era where medicine and daily life intertwined seamlessly. Yet the enigma persisted, a soft puzzle that added depth to their world. Whispers of a forgotten manuscript, perhaps hidden in the shadows of a pyramid's foundation, hinted at remedies that could mend the unseen wounds of the soul. This mystery, distinct and alluring, invited contemplation without resolution, its subtlety a nod to the wit of time itself, which conceals as much as it reveals. Through it all, the brewers moved with an innate wisdom, their practices echoing the calm of the Nile's flow. As evening descended, the sky painted in hues of soft amber and deepening blue, they would pause, inhaling the cooling air laced with lingering herbal notes. In these moments, the lost recipes seemed almost tangible, a faint aroma on the breeze, promising that some secrets endure in the heart's quiet corners. And so, as the stars began to emerge, casting a gentle veil over the village, one might ponder the next chapter in this ancient tale, where the mysteries of health and heritage continue to unfold. In the warm glow of a Giza dawn, where the Nile's gentle whisper met the ancient stones of the workshops, young figures stirred among the shadows of their family's trade. These were the children of Brewer families, their small forms clad in simple kilts that brushed against sun-warmed earth, as if the fabric itself held echoes of the river's rhythmic flow. In the 26th century BCE, during the Old Kingdom's steady hum, these boys and girls moved through the haze of barley dust, their roles woven into the fabric of sustenance like threads in a weaver's loom. Not grand scribes or pyramid builders, but quiet helpers in the art of brewing, where every grain carried the weight of tradition and the promise of nourishment for the land. Their days began with the soft patter of bare feet on packed clay floors, a sound like distant rain on palm leaves, as they gathered the first loads of barley. These children, often no taller than the storage jars they skirted, wore kilts of linen so light they fluttered with each step, catching the golden specks of dust that danced in the air. One might imagine a boy of 8 summers, his fingers tracing the rough edges of a woven basket filled with kernels, the grains slipping through his grasp like secrets yet to be told. The barley, harvested from fields kissed by the inundation, carried a scent of earth and sun, a warm, musty aroma that lingered on their skin like a faint memory. As they hoisted the baskets onto their shoulders, the weight pressed gently, a familiar burden that molded their young frames with quiet strength. In the workshops, dim lit by oil lamps that flickered like fireflies in the dusk, the children moved with a grace born of necessity. Historical records from the Old Kingdom, etched in the reliefs of tombs like those at Saqqara, depict such scenes with understated precision, showing youths carrying barley to the grinding stones. Yet in these carvings, one senses the unassuming rhythm of their tasks, the way a girl's soft footsteps echoed against the stone walls, each step a whisper against the silence. The grains themselves added to the sensory tapestry, dusty particles that caught the light, creating halos around their forms, and a texture underfoot that crunched ever so lightly, like the first frost on desert sands. Imagine the feel of those kernels, cool and irregular in their palms, a contrast to the heat of the day, as they poured them into wooden troughs for the millers. Beyond mere carrying, the children's roles extended to the preparatory arts of brewing, drawing from the social records that hint at family divisions of labor. A child might kneel beside the quern, their small hands guiding the stone over the barley, the grinding producing a soothing, rhythmic grind that hummed through the air like a lullaby. The sound was not harsh but melodic, a low murmur that blended with the distant calls of birds along the Nile, evoking a sense of continuity in the Old Kingdom's ordered world. Sensory details abound in these moments, the faint warmth radiating from the stones, worn smooth by generations, and the earthy taste of dust on the tongue if a breeze stirred it just so. Wit whispers in the irony that these young ones, with their innocent curiosity, handled the very essence of life's elixir beer, the drink that fueled pharaohs and laborers alike, yet did so with a detachment that belied their youth. One could picture a group of siblings working in tandem, their kilts tied neatly at the waist, as they sifted the ground malt through sieves of woven reeds. The process demanded a gentle touch, for too rough a hand might bruise the grains, altering the brew's subtle flavors. Here the air grew thick with the scent of fermenting mash, a sweet, tangy aroma that evoked the ripeness of dates hanging heavy in the groves. The children breathed it in, their lungs filling with the promise of the beverage that would quench the thirst of Giza's toiling masses. Old Kingdom accounts, such as those inferred from the biographical inscriptions in mastabas, suggest that such tasks were not merely chores but a form of early apprenticeship, where the young learned the craft through repetition and observation. A boy might pause to watch the mash settle, his eyes reflecting the play of light on the liquid's surface, a moment of quiet wonder amid the work. Yet amid this ordered routine there lingers a mystery, one that the ancient records only hint at and never fully unveil. For while the reliefs and papyri detail the visible tasks carrying, grinding, sifting, they leave gaps where unrecorded duties might have dwelled, like shadows in the lamplight. Perhaps these children undertook smaller, fleeting responsibilities, such as fetching water from the Nile at dawn, their jars balanced on heads with a poise that seemed almost innate, the cool splash of liquid against their skin a brief respite from the dust. Or maybe they tended to the yeast starters, nurturing the invisible agents of fermentation with a care that went unnoted in the grander annals. These unchronicled acts, drawn from the silences in Old Kingdom social documents, add an element of intrigue, a subtle puzzle for the modern mind. One wonders with a gentle curiosity if they whispered secrets to the brewing pots or observed rituals passed down in hushed tones, tasks too mundane or sacred to inscribe on stone. To expand upon this, consider the tactile sensations that define their world. The slight itch of barley husks against their legs as they waded through piles of grain, or the warmth of sun-baked bricks under their fingertips when they leaned against the workshop walls for a moment's rest. Historical examples from the period, like the depictions in the Tomb of Tai, offer glimpses of such scenes, where young figures are shown in the periphery, their expressions serene amid the labor. The wit lies in the contrast. These children, so small in the vastness of Egypt's legacy, held the key to a daily miracle, turning humble grains into the lifeblood of society, all while the world around them built pyramids to the sky. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the workshop floors, the children might have paused, their kilts dusted with the fine powder of their efforts, to feel the breeze that carried hints of the distant desert. The grains, now transformed, awaited the next stage, but for these young helpers, their roles were a tapestry of small, essential threads. In this gentle dance of labor, one senses the enduring spirit of the old kingdom, where even the youngest contributed to the harmony of life. Yet the mystery persists, a soft enigma wrapped in the folds of history. What other tasks did these children perform, unseen and unrecorded? Perhaps they mended the baskets with deft fingers, or kept watch over the fermenting jars through the night, their soft breaths mingling with the quiet bubbling. Such questions, drawn from the gaps in ancient texts like the Palermo stone's fragmentary accounts, invite a pondering gaze, a reminder that not all of Egypt's stories were etched in stone. In the fading light, as the workshops grew still, the children's roles faded into the evening like the last echoes of their footsteps. One might imagine them slipping away, baskets empty, to the world beyond, where other tales awaited. And so, as this chapter closes, the narrative turns toward new horizons, where the mysteries of the past continue to whisper through the sands. In the hushed twilight of 26th century BCE Giza, where the great pyramids loomed like silent guardians against the fading sun, a modest cluster of mudbrick homes nestled along the Nile's fertile edge. Here in the Brewer's village, life unfolded in rhythms as ancient as the river itself, far from the grandiosity of royal courts or the toil of daily labor. The air carried a gentle warmth, laced with the earthy scent of sun-baked clay and the faint, sweet tang of fermented grains, remnants of the day's quiet end. Men in simple kilts, their linen softened by years of wear, reclined in the dim glow of oil lamps, their bodies eased from the weight of existence in these humble abodes. The homes themselves were wonders of simplicity, their walls rising from the ground like the earth's own breath, molded from Nile mud and straw. Each structure whispered of generations past, their roofs of thatch and palm fronds creaking softly under the weight of evening breezes that rustled like distant secrets. A brewer named Keddy, his kilt draped loosely around his waist, leaned against a cool mudbrick wall, feeling the grainy texture under his calloused fingers. The firelight flickered in the central hearth, casting elongated shadows that danced across the floor like playful spirits, illuminating the faint etchings on the walls, simple patterns of waves and grains, echoes of a life intertwined with the river's bounty. The air was thick with the comforting aroma of barley and dates, a subtle reminder of the brews that sustained the community, though no pots bubbled now in the serenity of rest. Outside, the village lay in a loose grid, its paths winding between the homes like threads in a loosely woven mat. The ground felt firm beneath bare feet, dusted with fine sand that shifted gently, carrying whispers of the day's heat into the cooling night. Crickets chirped in a lullaby cadence, their song blending with the occasional splash of the Nile nearby, where water lapped against the banks in a soothing murmur. Keddy's neighbor, an older man called Senbai, sat cross-legged on a low stool, his kilt folded neatly, eyes half closed as he traced invisible lines in the air. The fire's warmth enveloped them, a gentle embrace that chased away the desert's chill, while the scent of smoldering herbs from a nearby brazier added a woody depth to the air, evoking memories of harvests long past. In these moments of repose, the brewers found solace in the familiar, their lives a tapestry woven from the ordinary yet profound. The mudbrick homes, with their thick walls that retained the day's heat like a mother's hold, offered a sanctuary from the vastness of the world beyond. A soft breeze stirred the thatch overhead, its creaks a rhythmic counterpart to the steady breath of the village, and the firelight played tricks on the eye, turning simple tools into fleeting shapes that hinted at stories untold. One might catch a whiff of the river's mud, rich and loamy, mingling with the faint bitterness of leftover mash, a sensory echo of the brews that had once filled their days. Yet as they rested, a subtle mystery lingered in the air, one that modern eyes might ponder through the lens of ancient excavation reports from sites like Giza and nearby settlements. Archaeologists, piecing together fragments from Old Kingdom digs, have long marveled at the elusive designs of such villages, where layouts seem to dissolve into the sands of time. Unlike the meticulously planned pyramids or the ordered estates of nobles, these humble abodes followed patterns that were organic, almost intuitive, yet frustratingly incomplete in the records. Reports from excavations at places like the workmen's village at Giza, uncovered in the early 20th century, reveal clusters of homes arranged in a seemingly haphazard fashion, their walls aligned not by grand designs but by the practical needs of community life. Yet gaps remain. Why, for instance, did certain homes feature recessed doorways that curved inward like welcoming arms, while others stood stark and unadorned? The mystery lies in these lost blueprints, perhaps sketched in perishable materials or passed down through oral traditions that vanished with the winds. Kedi, in his quiet repose, might have gazed at the stars through a small opening in the roof, wondering at the unseen hands that shaped his world, just as scholars today speculate on the subtle engineering that allowed these structures to endure floods and sands. The firelight, with its warm orange hues, cast a glow that softened the edges of reality, making the mudbrick surfaces seem alive with possibility. Senbai, his kilt rumpled from the day's wear, ran a hand over the cool stone of his grinding bowl, feeling the smooth depressions worn by countless uses, each groove a testament to the village's enduring rhythm. The air carried a hint of the night's dew settling on the thatch, a fresh, damp scent that mingled with the lingering warmth, creating a cocoon of comfort. In such evenings, the brewers spoke in low tones, their words like gentle waves, sharing tales that wove through the shadows. One story, drawn from the collective memory, spoke of a time when the village's founders had aligned their homes with the stars, perhaps to honor the gods or simply to navigate the dark, though excavation reports from sites like Abu Rosh suggest such alignments were rare and enigmatic. As the night deepened, the creaking of the roofs grew softer, a lullaby that cradled the senses. The fire's embers glowed like distant constellations, their faint crackle a counterpoint to the steady hum of the Nile. Kedi closed his eyes, the fabric of his kilt brushing against his skin in a familiar rasp, while the air around him thickened with the scent of earth and smoke. Historical accounts from Old Kingdom burials and artifacts, such as those found in the Giza Plateau's lesser tombs, hint at the brewers' role in society not as laborers in the fields, but as custodians of sustenance, their homes a reflection of a balanced existence. Yet the mystery persisted. Why were these village designs so fluid, so resistant to the rigid grids of later eras? Perhaps, as suggested by reports from the Egyptian Museum's collections, the brewers had adapted to the Nile's whims, building homes that ebbed and flowed like the river itself, leaving behind only fragments for us to puzzle over. In the quietude, a subtle wit emerged, not in boisterous laughter, but in the wry observations that flavored their rest. Senbai might muse aloud about how the creaking roofs sounded like the complaints of ancient gods, overlooked in the shadow of grander monuments, a light-hearted nod to the village's unassuming place in history. The sensory world enveloped them, the cool touch of mudbrick against weary backs, the soft glow that painted the room in hues of amber and shadow, the distant call of a night bird echoing like a forgotten melody. Excavation findings, such as the pottery shards and tool remnants from Giza's workmen's areas, paint a picture of lives lived with quiet ingenuity, where every home was a microcosm of survival and serenity. As the fire dwindled to a gentle ember, the brewers surrendered to the night's embrace, their kilts settling like fallen leaves. The mystery of the lost designs, those ephemeral blueprints that eluded even the most careful digs, lingered like a half-remembered dream, inviting reflection on the impermanence of all things. In this tranquil corner of ancient Giza, life was a soothing tapestry, woven with threads of earth, water, and fire, far from the clamor of pyramids or palaces. Yet as the stars wheeled overhead, thoughts turned inevitably toward the unseen connections that bound past to present, a subtle bridge to what lies beyond. The air grew still, the creaks faded, and in the deepening calm, one might almost hear the whisper of tomorrow's dawn, where new mysteries await their turn. In the soft glow of a Giza dawn, where the Nile's gentle whisper met the ancient stones of the plateau, the market stirred like a dream half-remembered. Brewers, clad in simple kilts of linen that brushed against their sun-warmed skin, moved through the stalls with the quiet rhythm of a river's flow. These artisans of fermentation, their hands calloused from years of tending clay jars, carried the essence of Egypt's old kingdom in every vessel they bore. Here in the 26th century BCE, trade was not a clamor but a serene exchange, where beer brewed from golden barley and the sweet kiss of date palms flowed as currency, binding the market in a web of subtle barters. The air hung heavy with the earthy scent of fermenting grains, a fragrance that lingered like a comforting memory, mingling with the faint dust rising from trampled paths. Stalls lined the marketplace, their wooden frames creaking softly under the weight of goods, each one a haven of calm amid the day's slow unfolding. A brewer named Caddy, his kilt tied neatly at the waist, approached a stall where a merchant displayed bolts of flax. Caddy's jars clinked gently as he set them down, the sound a soft chime that echoed through the morning haze, like distant temple bells calling the faithful. He bartered not with harsh words but with the promise of his brew, a rich ale that promised respite from the desert heat. "For your finest flax," he said, his voice a low murmur, "I offer jars that hold the sun's own warmth, brewed under the watchful eye of the gods." In those days, as recorded in the sparse inscriptions of Old Kingdom trade logs from the pyramid's shadows, brewers like Keddy held a quiet power. Beer was more than sustenance. It was a medium of exchange, drawn from ancient recipes etched into the walls of nearby tombs and granaries. The process began with the careful selection of emmer wheat and barley, harvested from the fertile floodplains and ground into a coarse meal that released a nutty aroma when mixed with water. Yeast, captured from the air or from previous batches, worked its invisible magic, transforming the mash into a frothy elixir. These practices, detailed in fragments of papyri and reliefs from the 5th dynasty, emphasized precision and patience qualities that infused the trade with a serene dignity. Keddy's beer, for instance, was fermented in large amphorae sealed with mud and straw, the jar's surfaces cool and smooth under his fingers as he inspected them before market. As the sun climbed higher, casting a golden veil over the stalls, other brewers joined the scene. A woman named Merit, her kilt embroidered with faint patterns of barley sheaves, balanced a yoke across her shoulders, from which dangled smaller pots. The weight shifted with each step, producing a rhythmic sway that whispered through the air, a subtle counterpoint to the market's hush. She approached a baker, his loaves arranged like offerings on a low table, and offered her beer in trade for bread. The exchange was deliberate, almost meditative, as Merritt described the beer's qualities: the slight tang of the dates added for sweetness, the way it slid smoothly over the tongue, leaving a trace of warmth. The baker nodded, his hands dusted with flour that caught the light, and they agreed without haste, the clink of coins unnecessary in this barter of essentials. Sensory memories wove through these transactions, painting the market in vivid, tranquil strokes. The dust from the ground rose in lazy swirls, settling on the brewers' kilts like a fine veil, carrying with it the scent of sun-baked earth and the faint, yeasty breath of open jars. One could almost feel the cool clay against one's palm, its surface etched with the fingerprints of generations, or hear the soft gurgle as beer was poured from one vessel to another. In the distance, the call of a vendor hawking figs added a melodic undercurrent, but the brewers' barters remained focused, their voices low and measured, infused with a subtle wit that turned negotiation into gentle wordplay. "My beer," Keddy might quip with a faint smile, "flows like the Nile, while your flax stands as still as the pyramids. Surely they were meant for each other." Yet, amid this peaceful commerce, a quiet mystery lingered, one that the Old Kingdom's trade records only hinted at in their incompleteness. The unrecorded logs, those transactions etched not in stone but in the shadows of memory, spoke of deals made in the quieter corners of the market, away from the scribe's watchful eyes. Perhaps a brewer like Merritt slipped an extra jar to a favored trader, not for gain but for the sake of alliance, leaving no trace in the official tallies. These omissions, as suggested by the gaps in 5th dynasty inventories found in the Giza necropolis, wove a tapestry of intrigue, subtle and unspoken. Why were certain barters omitted? Was it to evade the pharaohs' taxes, or simply the human inclination to keep some secrets close, like the hidden recipes for a particularly potent brew? The mystery added a layer of depth to the scene, a gentle enigma that invited contemplation without disturbance, much like the way the wind carried whispers through the stalls. Historical accounts from the era, such as those preserved in the reliefs of the mastabas at Giza, reveal that brewers often traveled from their workshops near the riverbanks, where the water's flow provided the perfect coolness for fermentation. They carried their goods in caravans of donkeys, the animals' hooves padding softly on the paths, their burdens swaying with a hypnotic rhythm. In the market, bartering extended beyond beer to include the byproducts of brewing: spent grains for animal feed, or the herbs used for flavoring, like coriander or fennel, which release their aromatic oils when crushed. Keddy, for example, once traded a batch infused with honey from the Delta, its sweetness drawing traders from afar, the sticky residue on the jars a tactile reminder of nature's bounty. These practices, corroborated by archaeological finds of beer residues in pottery shards, underscored the brewers' role as custodians of an ancient craft, their exchanges a testament to the era's ingenuity. As the morning wore on, the market's pace remained unhurried, the brewers' kilts fluttering lightly in the breeze that carried the Nile's moisture. Sensory details abounded, the cool splash of beer being sampled from a ladle, the earthy taste lingering on the lips, the visual play of sunlight glinting off polished jars. One brewer might pause to adjust his load, the leather straps creaking softly, while another engaged in a barter with a fisherman, offering ale for fresh tilapia, its scales shimmering like forgotten jewels. The wit in their interactions was understated, a clever turn of phrase about the beer's strength outlasting the day's heat, drawing soft chuckles that rippled through the air like a gentle wave. In these moments, the trade practices of the brewers revealed a world balanced on subtlety and tradition. Drawing from Old Kingdom sources, such as the economic texts from the reign of Userkaf, we see how beer served as a standard measure, with specific volumes equating to other goods a jar for a measure of oil, or two for a length of rope. Yet the unrecorded aspects persisted, a mystery that scholars still ponder, evident in the incomplete ledgers that survive to this day. Perhaps these gaps were intentional, preserving a space for personal discretion in an otherwise ordered society. By midday, as shadows lengthened and the market began to quiet, the brewers gathered their earnings, flax, bread, fish, and prepared to return to their homes. The clinking of jars grew faint, fading into the hum of the Nile, leaving behind a sense of serene closure. As the sun arched toward the horizon, thoughts of the day's exchanges lingered, a calming prelude to the mysteries that the night might hold, drawing one gently toward the next chapter of ancient life's unfolding tale. In the soft glow of a Giza evening, where the Nile's gentle murmur threaded through the air like a whispered lullaby, the brewers of the 26th century BCE gathered in their modest villages. These artisans, clad in linen kilts dyed with hues of ochre and flax, moved with a rhythmic grace that spoke of centuries-old traditions. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across mud-brick homes and palm-fringed paths, as the air grew fragrant with the earthy scent of fermenting grains. Here, amid the quiet hum of daily life, the brewers' festivals unfolded not as grand spectacles, but as serene celebrations of craft and harvest, a time when the simple joy of creation wove through the fabric of their world. The brewers, sturdy figures with sun-kissed skin and calloused hands, adorned their kilts with woven belts strung with barley stalks and date palm fibers, symbols of their labor. As twilight deepened, they assembled in the village squares, where clay pots brimmed with freshly brewed beer, its golden foam catching the last rays of light like tiny stars on the water's surface. The air carried the warm, yeasty aroma of the brew, a comforting blend that mingled with the faint sweetness of ripening figs from nearby orchards. One could almost feel the cool clay of the pots under fingertips, smooth and slightly damp from the Nile's embrace, as the brewers lifted them in quiet toasts. Drums began to echo softly through the gathering, their steady beats like a heartbeat pulsing beneath the earth's skin. Not the thunderous clamor of war or ritual, but a gentle rhythm that invited the body to sway, a subtle wit in its persistence, as if the drums themselves were sharing a knowing smile with the night. The brewers formed loose circles, their movements fluid and unhurried, feet shuffling on the packed earth that still held the day's warmth. A flute's reedy notes joined the drums, weaving a melody as light as the breeze that rustled the reeds along the riverbank, carrying hints of mint and wild herbs from the fields beyond. In these moments, the festivals revealed the brewer's world, a domain of sensory delight, far removed from the grand pyramids rising in the distance. They poured the beer with careful hands, the foam spilling over in lazy cascades, its texture creamy against the tongue, a taste that balanced the bitterness of hops with the subtle sweetness of honeyed dates. One brewer, perhaps named Kaimwesit after the scribe's records, might have shared a quiet laugh as he passed a pot, his voice a soft rumble like distant thunder, remarking on how the foam mirrored the Nile's playful waves. The beer, crafted from barley harvested under the watchful eye of the seasons, flowed freely, its warmth spreading through limbs weary from days of milling and fermenting. Yet amid this peaceful revelry, a mystery lingered, as elusive as the fading stars at dawn. The Old Kingdom records, etched on papyrus fragments and tomb inscriptions, speak of these festivals with tantalizing gaps, unrecorded rites that the brewers guarded like a secret recipe lost to time. Historians pore over the Palermo stone and the annals of the Fifth Dynasty, noting how beer was not just sustenance but a craft elevated to art, yet they find no clear account of what transpired in the quiet hours when the drums softened to a whisper. Was it a simple exchange of tales around the fire, or something more, a hidden knowledge of blending herbs that enhanced the brew's essence, passed only through gestures and glances? The mystery invites a gentle curiosity, like a lullaby that trails off into dreams, leaving one to wonder at the unseen threads that bound these moments. As the night deepened, the brewers' celebrations grew more intimate, their kilts swaying like river reeds in the wind. The air cooled, carrying the faint tang of smoked fish from evening meals, while torches flickered with a soft, golden light that danced across faces etched with lines of quiet contentment. One might hear the soft clink of pottery, a sound as reassuring as a heartbeat, accompanied by murmurs of appreciation for a particularly fine batch. The beer, drawn from large ceramic jars buried in the cool earth to preserve its flavor, offered a sensory tapestry. The crisp bite on the palate, the lingering warmth in the throat, and the way it seemed to echo the Nile's own flow, steady and life-giving. Historical accounts from the Old Kingdom, such as those in the tomb of Tai or the reliefs at Saqqara, depict brewers as essential figures, their work documented in scenes of granaries and brewing vats. Yet in these festivals there was no overt tie to the divine or the communal oaths that marked other gatherings. Instead, it was a pure celebration of the craft itself. A brewer might demonstrate the art of straining mash through linen cloths, the liquid dripping slowly, each drop a testament to patience and skill. The sensory details abound, the sticky residue on fingers, the earthy scent of the grains ground by stone mills, and the way the fire's glow reflected in the beer's surface, like a mirror to the stars above. Subtle wit threaded through the evening, as when a younger brewer playfully mimicked the foam's overflow, his gestures light and teasing, drawing soft chuckles from his companions. It was a reminder that even in ancient times, the human spirit found joy in the mundane, a calming rhythm that lulled the senses into peace. The drums persisted, their echoes fading into the distance like a sigh, while the beer continued to flow, its foam a fleeting emblem of abundance. As the festival waned, the brewers settled into smaller groups, sharing stories of harvests past, their voices a gentle murmur against the night. The unrecorded rites remained a whisper in the air, a mystery that historians like those who studied the Abusir papyri could only speculate upon. Perhaps it involved a silent acknowledgement of the barley's growth, a nod to the cycles of the sun and soil that sustained their craft. Whatever it was, it added a layer of enchantment, a subtle enigma that invited reflection without resolution. In the quiet aftermath, as the torches dimmed and the drums fell silent, the villages of Gezer returned to their serene repose. The brewers, their kilts now dusted with the night's dew, dispersed like shadows at dawn, carrying with them the intangible essence of their gathering. Yet as one festival ended, the promise of another lingered, a bridge to the rhythms of life that continued unbroken. And so, with the soft rustle of palm leaves in the breeze, we turn our thoughts to what lies beyond, where other tales of ancient Egypt await. In the quiet dawn of 26th century BCE Giza, where the Nile's gentle murmur blended with the first light brushing the pyramids, life stirred in the modest homes of brewer families. Women moved through their routines with a steady grace, their linen kilts swaying as they tended to the ancient art of grain and fermentation. These were the daughters and wives of brewers, their hands shaped by years of labor, yet their stories unfolded in a rhythm as soothing as the river's flow. In the cool shadows of mud-brick dwellings, they ground barley under the soft glow of firelight, a task woven into the fabric of daily existence, drawing from the Old Kingdom's social records that hint at their indispensable roles. The women rose before the sun fully crested the horizon, their kilts a simple wrap of white linen gathered neatly around their waists for ease of movement. These garments, practical and unadorned, allowed them to kneel on woven mats beside low wooden tables, where the grinding stones waited like faithful companions. The larger stone, a metatite-like base hewn from river-smoothed granite, lay steady under their palms, while the smaller mono stone fit perfectly into their hands, worn smooth by generations. As they pressed down, the barley kernels cracked and crumbled, releasing a warm, nutty aroma that filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of damp earth from the nearby Nile floods. The process was methodical, almost meditative, the stone's gentle rasp a lullaby against the silence of the early hours, each stroke a whisper of continuity in a world balanced on the cycles of harvest and flood. Firelight danced across their faces, casting a golden hue that softened the lines of labor etched into their skin. In the hearth's warm embrace, flames flickered low and steady, heating water for the mash in clay pots blackened from use. The women worked in pairs or alone, their movements synchronized without need for words, drawing on knowledge passed down through oral traditions, as noted in fragments of Old Kingdom papyri. One might pause to adjust the fire, coaxing it with a breath that stirred embers into a soft glow, while another continued the grinding, the stone's cool surface warming under her touch. The air grew thick with the earthy sweetness of fermenting grains, a subtle perfume that evoked the vast fields of barley swaying under the Egyptian sun, harvested by men but transformed by women's hands. Their roles extended beyond the mere mechanics of brewing, encompassing the stewardship of household provisions and the subtle alchemy that turned simple ingredients into sustenance. Historical accounts from the Old Kingdom, such as those inscribed on tomb walls and administrative texts from Giza, reveal that women in brewer families managed the initial stages of beer production, a staple drink that nourished workers on the pyramids and sustained daily life. They selected the finest barley, winnowing it with deft flicks of woven baskets to separate chaff from grain, the light particles floating away like whispers on the breeze. Then came the grinding, a task requiring both strength and precision, as uneven flour could spoil the batch. In these moments, the women's kilts, hitched up slightly to avoid the dust, became symbols of their quiet authority, a garment that spoke of functionality over finery, much like the understated elegance of the Nile itself. As the day progressed, the rhythm of their work created a serene cadence, the grinding stones producing a soft, repetitive sound that echoed through the home like a distant heartbeat. One could imagine the warmth of the sun filtering through reed mats hung over doorways, casting patterns on the floor where the women knelt, their bare feet pressing into the cool, packed earth. The firelight ever present threw long shadows that played across the walls, illuminating simple tools, a wooden spoon for stirring, a sieve of stretched fabric for straining, and the occasional clay jug waiting to be filled. These details, drawn from archaeological finds like those at Giza's mastabas, paint a picture of lives intertwined with the land's bounty, where women's labor ensured the family's survival, and perhaps even their status among neighbors. Yet amid this orderly routine, a gentle mystery lingers, one that Old Kingdom records only hint at and never fully reveal. What unrecorded tasks did these women undertake in the hidden corners of their homes, away from the scribe's gaze? The papyri speak of brewing as a communal necessity, but they fall silent on the subtler arts, the precise blending of herbs for flavor, the whispered incantations over fermenting pots to ward off spoilage, or the careful allocation of resources during lean seasons. Perhaps they managed secret exchanges of recipes, passed in low voices under the cover of night, or tended to the spiritual aspects of brewing, offerings to household gods that went unmentioned in official texts. This enigma, as elusive as the shifting sands beyond Giza, adds a layer of intrigue to their story, a subtle wit in the way history teases us with what it withholds. In the afternoon light, as the grinding paused for a moment of rest, the women might sip from a cup of the previous day's brew, its mild tang a reward for their efforts. The drink, light and nourishing, carried the essence of their labor, a testament to skills honed over centuries. Old Kingdom reliefs from nearby tombs depict similar scenes, though often idealized, showing women with poised expressions, their kilts immaculate, as they present offerings of beer to deities. But in reality, their days were filled with the tangible sensations of work, the slight sting of grain dust on their skin, the comforting weight of the stone in their hands, the faint crackle of the fire that never fully died. These details, preserved in the artifacts of daily life, remind us of the women's resilience, their roles not just as laborers but as guardians of an ancient craft. As evening approached, the women prepared the final mixtures, pouring the ground barley into large fermentation jars sealed with mud caps. The firelight dimmed to a cozy glow, casting a tranquil spell over the home, where the air still hummed with the day's accomplishments. In these quiet hours, one might ponder the broader implications of their work, how it sustained the great builders of Giza and wove into the social tapestry of the Old Kingdom. Yet the mystery persists: what other duties, perhaps more personal or innovative, did they perform that left no trace in the records? Did they experiment with new strains of grain or adapt techniques during droughts, innovations that shaped brewing's evolution without credit? Through it all, their presence was a calming constant, a lullaby of motion and scent that defined the Brewer family's world. The grinding stones, now set aside, rested like old friends, their surfaces etched with the patterns of countless hands. Firelight lingered in the fading day, a soft reminder of the women's enduring legacy, one that history acknowledges but never fully captures. And as the stars began to emerge over Giza, whispering of nights to come, we turn our thoughts gently toward the next thread of this ancient tale, where other facets of life await discovery. Word count 1,500. In the hushed twilight of ancient Giza, where the Nile's whisper met the vast sands of the 26th century BCE, a group of brewers gathered as the sun dipped low. These men, clad in simple linen kilts that fluttered gently in the evening breeze, had spent their days tending to clay pots and fermentation vats, coaxing barley and emmer into the golden elixir that sustained their world. Now, as stars began to pierce the darkening sky, they formed a circle around a modest fire, its flames dancing with a rhythm as old as the pyramids rising in the distance. The air carried the faint, earthy scent of brewing grains mixed with the sharper aroma of smoldering tamarisk wood, a comforting blend that wrapped around them like a familiar shawl. The eldest brewer, his skin weathered by years under the relentless sun, settled onto a low stone with a soft sigh. His voice, smooth and low like the murmur of a distant river, broke the quiet first. "In the time before our time," he began, his words weaving through the crackling logs that popped and hissed in protest against the cool night air. The fire's glow painted warm shadows across their faces, highlighting the lines etched by labor and laughter, while the soft rustle of palm fronds overhead added a gentle counterpoint to his tale. These stories were not grand epics of gods or kings, but threads of daily life drawn from the brewer's own lineage, echoes of old kingdom wisdom preserved in the oral traditions of their trade. As the flames flickered, casting a golden haze over the group, another brewer leaned in, his kilt draping loosely over his crossed legs. He spoke of a clever artisan who, much like themselves, had outwitted a rival by hiding a secret ingredient in his beer, a tale inspired by fragments from the tomb biographies of the era, where skilled craftsmen boasted of their ingenuity in everyday pursuits. The air grew thick with the memory of that beer, its malty sweetness lingering in their minds, mingled with the actual scent of embers and the distant hum of nocturnal insects. The brewers nodded, their voices rising and falling in a soothing cadence, each man adding a detail or variation that made the story their own. It was a ritual born of long evenings, a way to unwind the knots of the day's toil while the fire's warmth seeped into their bones, easing the ache of lifted sacks and stirred vats. One tale unfolded slowly, like the gentle flow of honey from a comb, describing a brewer from the early 5th dynasty who had navigated a treacherous flood by reading the stars and the river's moods. He watched the waters rise, the storyteller continued, his tone laced with a subtle wit, as if the river itself had played a clever game of hide and seek with the land. The listeners could almost feel the cool spray of the Nile on their skin, hear the rhythmic lapping against the riverbanks, and taste the faint bitterness of over-fermented beer that had spoiled in the deluge. Yet there was no drama in the telling, only a calm reflection on the consequences a harvest lost, but lessons gained for future seasons. The fire crackled softly, its sparks rising like fleeting thoughts into the night, while the brewers' soft voices blended into a lullaby-like harmony, drawing each man deeper into the shared warmth. As the stories meandered on, the mystery of lost oral tales began to weave through their words, a subtle undercurrent that added a layer of intrigue without disturbing the serene atmosphere. In those days, not all tales were etched into stone or papyrus. Many were carried on the breath of the wind, shared in circles like this one, only to vanish when the tellers passed into the eternal sands. The brewers spoke of fragments, whispers of adventures that had slipped from memory, tales of clever deceptions in the marketplace or quiet rivalries among the brew houses of Giza. One elder mused with a faint smile that hinted at wry amusement, about a story of a brewer who had once brewed a beer so perfect it enchanted all who tasted it, yet no record remained, lost to the passage of time like footprints washed away by the dawn tide. The fire's glow seemed to dim slightly, as if acknowledging the impermanence, while the cool night air brushed against their skin, carrying the faint, earthy perfume of the brewing grounds nearby. To expand upon this enigma, the group delved into historical echoes from Old Kingdom texts, drawing from the practical wisdom in administrative papyri and artisans' inscriptions that celebrated the everyday. One brewer recalled how their forebears might have adapted recipes during scarce years, a detail inspired by the subtle clues in tomb reliefs showing granaries and brewing scenes. "Imagine," he said, his voice a gentle wave, the scent of fresh barley roasting over such a fire, the warmth seeping into your hands as you ground it, and the tale that went with it now faded, like the last light of day. The listeners closed their eyes, picturing the grain's golden hue, the satisfying crunch under stone tools, and the soft thud of mallets shaping clay pots. This mystery lent a poignant depth to their gathering, a reminder that not all knowledge endured, yet in the retelling, it lived on, if only for a moment. The night deepened, and the fire's embers glowed with a steady, reassuring light, their soft crackle accompanied by the occasional hoot of an owl in the distance. Another story emerged, this one of a brewer who had journeyed to the quarries for stone, bringing back not just materials but a yarn of camaraderie among workers. The tale was rich with sensory layers, the rough texture of the kilt against skin, the metallic tang of tools, and the satisfying weight of a well-crafted pot. Subtle wit crept in as the storyteller noted how the brewer's beer had smoothed over disputes, like a drop of honey in a bitter brew, evoking chuckles that were more breaths than laughs, keeping the tone light and unassuming. Yet amid the calm, the lost tales lingered as a quiet shadow. The brewers pondered how many such stories had dissolved into the air, unrecorded in the annals that favored kings and monuments. Drawing from the sparse but telling records of Old Kingdom literature, they reflected on how brewers' wisdom passed down through generations might have included secrets of flavor and fermentation that time had erased. One man described the feel of warm clay vessels in hand, the subtle variation in beer's foam as it caught the firelight, and how a tale once told might have explained a rare technique now forgotten. The mystery was not one of tragedy, but of gentle loss, a detached observation that such ephemera enriched the human tapestry before fading away. As the fire began to wane, its last flames flickering like distant memories, the brewers' voices softened further, blending with the night's tranquil symphony. They spoke of how these gatherings preserved what could be saved, even as the lost tales whispered through the shadows. The air grew cooler, carrying the lingering scent of smoke and fermented grains, a natural lullaby that eased their minds toward rest. In this way the tradition endured, a thread connecting them to their ancestors, woven with the simple magic of shared words. And so, as the embers dimmed and the stars wheeled overhead, the circle began to dissolve, each brewer rising with a quiet nod. Yet in the calm that followed, one might imagine the stories drifting onward, perhaps to find new ears in the dawn, transitioning subtly to the next whisper of history that awaited. In the soft glow of the morning sun over ancient Giza, the air hung thick with the earthy scent of baking bread and fermenting grains, a gentle rhythm that whispered through the bustling market streets. Brewers, clad in simple linen kilts that fluttered lightly in the breeze, moved with deliberate grace among the stalls, their calloused hands cradling clay jars of beer. These vessels, sealed with beeswax and etched with faint hieroglyphs, clinked softly against one another as they were set down on woven mats, a sound like distant water lapping at the Nile's banks. Merchants, draped in heavier robes stained by the dust of distant travels, eyed the offerings with a mix of appraisal and quiet anticipation, their voices low and measured in the haze of the early day. The brewers of Giza, descendants of traditions stretching back through the Old Kingdom, knew the craft as an art passed down in murmurs and gestures, not grand proclamations. They worked in modest workshops near the river's edge, where the water's cool touch mingled with the warm steam of boiling wort, creating a brew that was more than sustenance, it was a currency of trust. One such brewer, a man named Kedi, with skin bronzed by years under the relentless sun, approached the market square with a laden donkey, its hooves padding softly on the packed earth. His kilt, tied loosely at the waist, revealed legs marked by the scars of labor, yet he carried himself with an unhurried poise, as if the world moved at his measured pace. The merchants gathered, their stalls arrayed with bolts of linen, polished stones from the eastern deserts, and baskets of dates that gleamed like amber in the light. As Kedi arranged his jars on a low table, the clatter of clay against wood echoed faintly, a subtle symphony that blended with the calls of distant birds and the rustle of palm fronds overhead. The beer inside sloshed gently, its aroma a blend of barley sweetness and a hint of wild herbs drifting like a soothing mist, inviting the merchants closer. In those moments, trade unfolded not as a frantic exchange, but as a quiet dance of nods and smiles, where words were few and meanings clear. A merchant from the southern reaches, his face lined with the stories of long caravans, leaned in to inspect a jar, his fingers tracing the wax seal with the care of one handling a sacred relic. From the first flood's harvest, he asked softly, his voice carrying the lilt of the river valley. Kedi nodded, his eyes crinkling at the corners with a subtle wit, for he knew the beer was indeed from the recent inundation, its flavors deepened by the fertile silt. In the Old Kingdom records, etched on fragments of papyrus and stone tablets preserved in the shadows of pyramids, such transactions were noted sparingly, often as simple tallies of goods exchanged. Yet there was an undercurrent of mystery to these dealings, a veil of unrecorded agreements that lingered like the faint haze over the market. Deals were struck not with ink and reed, but through shared glances and the weight of a handshake, promises sealed by the gods of the harvest and the river. One might barter a dozen jars for a length of fine cloth, the agreement vanishing into the air as quickly as the morning dew, leaving no trace for scribes to capture. The market itself was a tapestry of sensory whispers, the warm dust rising from trodden paths, coating everything in a fine layer that sparkled under the sun. The cool press of a jar against one's palm, its surface rough and reassuring, the faint tang of spices from nearby stalls mingling with the beer's malty essence. Children darted between the legs of adults, their laughter a soft undercurrent, while dogs lounged in the shade, their tails swishing lazily. Keddy poured a sample into a small cup for the merchant, the liquid flowing with a gentle gurgle, its foam cresting like the Nile's gentle waves. The merchant sipped, his expression softening as the beer's warmth spread through him, a reminder of the simple pleasures that bound them all. In these interactions, the brewers held a quiet power, for beer was the lifeblood of the people, a staple that fueled laborers on the pyramid sites and softened the edges of daily toil. Historical accounts from the era, such as those inscribed on the walls of nearby tombs, spoke of brewers as integral to society, their craft documented in reliefs showing figures much like Keddy, kilts adorned with tools of their trade. Yet the mystery deepened in the gaps between these records, where unlogged trades hinted at a shadow economy. Perhaps a brewer like Keddy would slip an extra jar to a favored merchant, a gesture repaid with a pouch of rare herbs not listed in any ledger, their exchange a secret woven into the fabric of trust. As the sun climbed higher, casting a golden veil over the scene, other brewers joined Keddy, their kilts swaying in unison as they negotiated with merchants from various corners of the kingdom. One woman, though the records often favored men in public tales, worked alongside him, her presence a subtle nod to the shared labor of the craft. Her kilt was tied with a cord of flax, and she moved with the same calming rhythm, her voice a low murmur as she described the beer's origins, the barley gleaned from fields kissed by the river's flood, the yeast captured from the air like a whisper from the gods. The merchants in turn shared tales of their journeys, the dusty roads lined with acacia trees whose leaves rustled in the wind, carrying scents of far-off oases. These exchanges were laced with a subtle wit, as when Keddy quipped about the merchant's latest acquisition, a bundle of reeds that might one day become flutes to serenade the night. "May your songs flow as smoothly as this brew," he said with a faint smile, his words carrying the lullaby-like quality of a story told by firelight. The mystery of these unrecorded deals added a layer of intrigue, for in an age where scribes noted the grand deeds of pharaohs, the everyday barter of beer and goods slipped into obscurity. Were there hidden pacts, perhaps sealed with a token from the river's edge, that influenced the flow of resources without the eyes of officials? The air seemed to hold the answer, heavy with the scent of sun-warmed stone and the faint echo of unspoken words. Throughout the day, the market pulsed with this serene energy, the clinking of jars a constant, soothing backdrop to the negotiations. A merchant might run his fingers through the dust on a jar, feeling the grains that spoke of the desert's embrace, or inhale the beer's aroma, evoking memories of feasts in shaded courtyards. Keddy, ever the steady presence, ensured his brews were measured with precision, drawing from historical practices where quantities were gauged by the eye and the heart, not rigid scales. In the Old Kingdom, as detailed in surviving reliefs from Giza's workshops, brewers like him relied on generational knowledge, blending water from sacred wells and grains from the annual harvest to create elixirs that sustained the soul. As afternoon waned, the interactions grew more introspective, the merchants lingering longer, perhaps sharing a cup under the canopy of a date palm. The mystery of unrecorded trades wove through these moments, like threads in a tapestry unseen, prompting quiet reflections on what was left out of the annals. Did a brewer's subtle nod seal a deal that altered the path of a caravan, or was it merely the wind's whisper carrying secrets away? The scene unfolded with a detached calm, focusing on the consequences, the shared prosperity, the bonds forged rather than any underlying tensions. By evening's approach, as shadows lengthened and the market began to quiet, Keddy gathered his empty jars, their surfaces now marked by the day's exchanges. The merchants departed with their burdens, the dusty goods and full vessels a testament to the day's subtle symphony. In this corner of ancient Giza, the interactions between brewers and merchants painted a picture of enduring harmony, a lullaby of human connection amidst the vast expanse of history. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a serene glow over the pyramids in the distance, one couldn't help but wonder what unseen paths these trades might illuminate next, leading gently into the tales yet to unfold. In the hushed glow of a Giza dawn, where the Nile's whisper met the ancient stones, the brewers of the 26th century BCE moved with the quiet rhythm of ritual. Tall figures draped in simple linen kilts, their skin kissed by the desert sun, gathered in the cool shadows of low-roofed workshops. These men and women, descendants of the Old Kingdom's artisans, tended to their tools with a care born of necessity and reverence, for in those simple implements lay the essence of sustenance and tradition. The air carried the faint, earthy scent of barley dust, lingering like a forgotten dream, as they set to work under the watchful gaze of carved limestone walls. The workshops themselves were modest sanctuaries, carved from the same sun-baked mud bricks that formed the great pyramids rising in the distance. Here, amid the gentle clink of tools, the brewers focused on the vat's large, earthenware vessels shaped by hands long turned to dust. Each vat, wide-mouthed and sturdy, bore the marks of countless uses, faint scratches from stirring rods, the smooth patina of oils and residues. The brewers approached them not with haste, but with a soothing deliberation, as if coaxing life from stone. One man, his kilt tied neatly at the waist, knelt beside a vat, his calloused fingers tracing the rim with the tenderness of a parent smoothing a child's hair. He began with a soft, bristled brush, fashioned from palm fibers bound to a wooden handle, its ends frayed from faithful service. The brush whispered against the vat's inner surface, dislodging specks of dried residue that fluttered like autumn leaves. The scent of damp clay mingled with the musty aroma of old grain, a comforting blend that evoked memories of harvests past. Nearby, another brewer wielded a cloth of woven flax, dampened with water drawn from the river's edge. She scrubbed in slow, circular motions, the fabric gliding over the cool stone with a rhythmic hush, like the ebb and flow of the Nile itself. Each stroke released a fine powder of barley dust, invisible save for the way it caught the morning light, dancing in motes that settled gently on the workshop floor. In these moments, the brewers' movements were a dance of precision, their kilts swaying lightly as they worked. One might pause to inspect a wooden paddle, its edge worn smooth from years of stirring. He ran his thumb along the grain, feeling the subtle give of the wood, and with a wry smile subtle as a desert breeze murmured to himself about how such a simple tool had outlasted kings. For in the Old Kingdom, as revealed by the archaeological digs at sites like the Giza Plateau, tools were not mere objects but extensions of the soul, crafted with techniques that echoed through the ages. The paddles, often hewn from acacia or sycamore, required regular oiling to prevent cracking under the harsh sun. A brewer would dip a rag into a small jar of rendered fat, the warm, nutty smell rising like a soft sigh, and rub it into the wood with deliberate care. As the morning deepened, the workshop filled with the subtle symphony of maintenance. The sound of scrubbing stone against stone was a low, soothing murmur, like distant waves lapping at the riverbank. One brewer used a flat river rock, polished by the Nile's flow, to smooth the rough edges of a strainer basket. Woven from reeds and reeds alone, the basket's intricate latticework demanded attention. Any frayed strand could compromise its form. He worked methodically, his fingers deftly weaving in new fibers, the faint crunch of reed against reed a gentle counterpoint to the quiet. The air grew faintly warmer, carrying the earthy tang of the materials, and one could almost taste the dust on the tongue, a reminder of the fields where barley once swayed under the sky. Yet amid this careful tending, a quiet mystery lingered, as elusive as the shadows in the workshop corners. The tools of these ancient brewers, uncovered in fragments from Old Kingdom tombs and sites such as the mastabas at Saqqara, hinted at designs lost to the sands of time. For instance, the vats themselves, with their precise curvature and reinforced bases, suggested an engineering finesse that modern eyes struggle to fully grasp. Archaeologists have pieced together shards from Giza's breweries, revealing tools with unexpected symmetries, perhaps grooves for better grip or subtle engravings that might have served as alignment markers. One can imagine a brewer pausing, his hand resting on a vat's edge, wondering at the forgotten artisan who first shaped it. Was it a master from the time of Khufu, whose pyramid loomed nearby, who devised a way to temper clay with river silt for added strength. Or a wandering craftsman carrying secrets from the south, who etched patterns that aligned with the stars. This enigma of lost designs added a layer of gentle intrigue to the brewer's work, a subtle wit in the way their tools seemed to hold stories untold. As one brewer honed the edge of a copper scraper found in relics from the period, its metal gleaming faintly under oil with a whetstone sourced from the eastern quarries, he might have chuckled softly at the thought. The scraper's blade, kept sharp to remove stubborn residues without marring the vat, spoke of a knowledge that had slipped away, much like the Nile's floods that varied year by year. Historical examples drawn from the careful excavations at Giza show similar tools with traces of advanced metallurgy, yet no records explain their exact creation. It was as if the tools themselves were guardians of secrets, whispering only to those who tended them with patience. Throughout the day, the brewers moved from one task to another with a lullaby-like grace. A woman might lift a large sieve, its mesh of woven grass needing to be tightened and cleaned. She shook it gently, the faint rattle a soothing cadence, and wiped away dust with a cloth scented by the herbs stored nearby. The sensory details were everywhere, the cool weight of the stone tools in hand, the gritty texture of barley remnants underfoot, the soft glow of sunlight filtering through reed mats. Even the occasional breeze, carrying the distant scent of baking bread from nearby hearths, wove into the scene like a comforting thread. As the sun climbed higher, casting a golden haze over the workshops, the brewers ensured every tool was pristine. They might oil the hinges of wooden frames that held the vat steady, the rich, warm aroma of the lubricant evoking the oil presses of the fertile valley. One brewer, with a hint of wry observation, noted how a well-maintained tool could last as long as the pyramids themselves, a subtle nod to the enduring spirit of their craft. Archaeological evidence from Old Kingdom sites, such as the tool caches in workmen's villages, supports this. Simple yet robust implements, like mallets and scrapers, designed for longevity in a world where resources were precious. In these quiet hours, the mystery deepened, a gentle puzzle that invited reflection rather than urgency. Perhaps the lost designs held clues to efficiencies we no longer possess, innovations that made the brewers' lives a touch easier in an era of manual toil. One could picture a brewer sitting back, his kilt dusted with fine particles, pondering the faint inscriptions on a tool handle markings that might have been codes or signatures, now indecipherable. As the afternoon waned, the brewers finished their tasks, the workshops falling into a peaceful hush. The vats gleamed, the tools rested in their places, and the air settled with the day's accomplishments. Yet as the shadows lengthened toward evening, thoughts turned inevitably onward, to the mysteries that time might yet unveil in the segments to come. In the fading light of the 25th century BCE, the ancient streets of Giza whispered secrets of a bygone era, where the air once hummed with the rhythmic slosh of fermenting grains. Now a gentle hush fell over the mud-brick breweries, their walls etched with the patient lines of time. Brewers, clad in kilts frayed at the hems like forgotten scrolls, moved with the slow grace of those who had outlasted their craft. The sun dipped low, casting a warm, amber glow over the Nile's edge, where the river's murmur seemed to lull the world into a reflective slumber. These breweries, once the heart of Giza's daily rhythm, stood as weary sentinels along the riverbanks. Their vats, crafted from sun-baked clay and reinforced with reeds, now slumped under layers of dust and disuse. The scent of barley and date palms lingered faintly, a ghostly aroma that evoked memories of plentiful harvests, but the air carried a new undertone, a dry, earthen whisper of neglect. Inside, the great fermentation jars, their surfaces cracked like the skin of an aged hand, held only echoes of the past. A brewer might pause, his fingers tracing the rim of a vessel, feeling the cool, uneven texture that spoke of countless brews. The kilts they wore, once vibrant with dyes from the delta, hung loosely, their threads whispering against the stone floors in a soft, rhythmic rustle, as if sharing tales of better days. The decline crept in like the evening tide, subtle and inexorable, washing over the workshops with a calm that belied its permanence. In the quiet villages surrounding Giza, where families had gathered for generations to share the fruits of the brew, the courtyards now echoed with emptiness. The sound of grinding mortars had faded, replaced by the gentle sigh of wind through palm fronds. One might imagine the brewers at dawn, their movements deliberate and unhurried, lifting worn wooden paddles to stir what remained of their mixtures. The paddles, smoothed by years of use, felt heavy in their grips, their weight a reminder of labors that once sustained feasts for pharaohs and common folk alike. Yet as the sun climbed higher, the shadows lengthened across the brewery floors, and the brewers' shadows grew faint, mirroring the dimming of their trade. Archaeological traces from the Old Kingdom speak of a craft that had flourished under the watchful eyes of the gods, with brewing tied to the very essence of life along the Nile. Reports from excavations near Giza reveal storage rooms filled with amphorae, their shapes preserved in the sand, hinting at a time when beer flowed as freely as the river. But now those same rooms stood silent, their shelves barren save for a few scattered shards. The brewers, their faces lined with the wisdom of seasons, would gather what grains they could, the earthy scent of emmer wheat mixing with the musty tang of aging thatch. They worked by the light filtering through small, high windows, casting soft patterns on the walls like fleeting dreams. There was a subtle wit in their persistence, a quiet chuckle in the way they mended a leaking vat with reeds, as if the world were playing a gentle trick on them, urging them to adapt to an unseen shift. As the days blurred into one another, the causes of this decline remained shrouded in mystery, a puzzle as elusive as the stars above the pyramids. Old Kingdom reports, drawn from the careful sifting of ruins, offer glimpses but no clear answers, perhaps a change in the Nile's floods, less generous than before, or shifts in trade routes that left Giza's breweries isolated. One might sense it in the air, a faint dryness that spoke of altered seasons, where the once reliable rains grew capricious. The brewers spoke little of it, their voices low and melodic, like a lullaby carried on the breeze, as they pondered the unrecorded whispers of fate. Was it the gods' subtle displeasure, or merely the slow turn of the world? The mystery lingered, untouched by the scribe's reeds, a serene enigma that added a layer of intrigue to the fading craft. In the courtyards where children once played amidst the cooling vats, the ground now felt firm and unyielding underfoot, the packed earth holding the memory of spilled brews like faded ink. The sensory tapestry of the breweries wove together the cool touch of clay against skin, the faint bitterness of under-fermented grains on the tongue, and the soft glow of oil lamps that flickered like distant stars. A brewer might sit at day's end, his kilt draped over his lap, the fabric's worn weave brushing against his legs in a comforting rhythm, as he gazed at the horizon. There the pyramids loomed in the distance, their grandeur a silent backdrop to the village's quiet unraveling, yet the brewers avoided dwelling on such monuments, focusing instead on their immediate world. Historical examples from the era, as documented in archaeological surveys, illustrate how brewing had been more than sustenance. It was a ritual, a social glue that bound communities. Yet as the decline deepened, the brewery's tools began to gather dust, their handles smooth from disuse rather than work. The sound of pouring liquids, once a symphony of daily life, reduced to an occasional trickle from a cracked jug, echoed softly through the halls. The brewers, with their steady hands and knowing eyes, adapted in small ways, perhaps blending herbs from the nearby fields to mask the weakening flavors, their actions laced with a wry, understated humor. It was as if they were saying, in their unassuming manner, that even in fading, there was a certain elegance to the craft's last breaths. The villages themselves seemed to breathe more slowly, their paths lined with date palms whose fronds rustled in the wind like gentle sighs. The air carried the mingled scents of sun-warmed stone and distant herbs, creating a soothing ambience that enveloped the scene. Brewers would step outside at twilight, feeling the cool breeze against their skin, a stark contrast to the day's lingering warmth, and reflect on the craft's evolution. Reports from Old Kingdom sites suggest that such declines were not uncommon, with environmental shifts playing a role, yet the specifics eluded even the most diligent excavators. This mystery, unique to Giza's brewing legacy, added a layer of poetic depth, a calm puzzle that invited contemplation rather than alarm. As the nights grew longer, the brewers' routines became rituals of remembrance, their kilts swaying softly as they moved through the dim light. The tactile world of their work, the grainy feel of barley between fingers, the subtle hiss of steam from a heating pot served as anchors in a changing tide. Subtle wit emerged in their stories, shared in hushed tones around low fires, where they might jest about the grain's reluctance to ferment, as if the crops themselves had grown weary of the cycle. Yet beneath it all, the consequences unfolded with a detached serenity, fewer gatherings, quieter markets, and a gradual shift in the community's rhythm. In the end, as the stars wheeled overhead, the decline of Egyptian brewing in Giza became a lullaby of its own, a soothing tale of impermanence wrapped in the folds of history. The mystery of its unrecorded causes lingered like a half-forgotten dream, inviting future generations to ponder the unseen forces that shape the world. And so, as this chapter fades, one might turn thoughts to what lies beyond, where other stories await in the sands of time. Beneath the vast star-strewn sky of Giza, where the pyramids stand as silent guardians of forgotten eras, a gentle breeze stirred the sands, whispering secrets from the past. Archaeologists moved with careful grace, their tools glinting faintly in the moonlight, as they uncovered the remnants of an ancient craft that had once flowed through the veins of Egypt's daily life. Here, amid the soft rustle of palm fronds and the faint, earthy scent of disturbed soil, lay the legacy of the ancient Egyptian brewers' vats and vessels that spoke of a time when beer was more than sustenance. It was a thread woven into the fabric of society. The excavation began at dawn, when the first rays of sun painted the desert in hues of warm amber and gold. Dr. Amina Khalil, a seasoned archaeologist with a quiet passion for the Nile's hidden stories, knelt beside a cluster of buried forms. Her fingers, calloused yet tender, brushed away layers of fine, powdery dust that clung like a veil to the clay surfaces below. The vats emerged slowly, their rounded shapes revealing the craftsmanship of artisans, long gone smooth curves, etched with faint hieroglyphs that danced under the light. One vat, larger than the others, caught the morning glow, its surface glinting with flecks of embedded stone, remnants of the quartz and feldspar that had been mixed into the clay for strength and shine. The air carried a subtle, musty aroma, a blend of aged earth and the faint, fermented echo of barley and emmer wheat, as if the vessels themselves remembered the brews they once held. In those quiet moments, the team marveled at the precision of the ancient makers. Historical records from the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, drawing from UNESCO documentation of sites like the Giza necropolis, reveal that brewing was an art perfected over millennia. The ancient Egyptians, as noted in museum archives, brewed beer not merely for refreshment, but as a cornerstone of their economy and culture, with recipes passed down through generations. These vats, unearthed with such care, were likely part of a workshop from the Old Kingdom, around 2500 BCE, where brewers transformed simple grains into nourishing drinks. The process involved malting barley in the sun-warmed air, its golden kernels swelling with moisture before being ground and fermented in these very containers. Imagine the brewers of old, their hands dusted with floury residue, working under the shade of date palms, the rhythmic sound of pestles against mortars creating a soothing cadence that echoed across the Nile's banks. As the day progressed, the archaeologists pieced together the legacy that lingered in modern Egypt. The vats, preserved in the dry embrace of the desert, mirrored techniques still echoed in today's small-scale breweries along the river. UNESCO reports highlight how ancient brewing methods influenced contemporary practices, such as those seen in rural villages where families ferment traditional beers for festivals. Sensory details from the artifacts painted vivid pictures, the cool, rough texture of the clay under fingertips, etched with patterns that suggested the flow of liquid, and the occasional glint of mineral veins that caught the eye like distant stars. One particularly intact vat bore faint stains, a faded amber hue that hinted at the beer's original color, evoking the taste of something malty and slightly sweet, with a whisper of herbs like coriander and dates that the ancients might have added for flavor. Yet amid this rediscovery, a gentle mystery unfolded, one that wrapped around the hearts of the team like a soft evening fog. The forgotten tales of the brewers themselves remained elusive, shadows in the annals of time. Museum records speak of named figures, like the brewer Hesier from the 3rd dynasty, whose tomb inscriptions praised his skill in creating elixirs for the pharaohs, but many others faded into obscurity. What stories lay hidden in these vats? Perhaps the hieroglyphs, worn but whispering, told of a secret guild of brewers who guarded recipes as sacred as the pyramid's alignments. In a detached recounting, one might note that such mysteries arise from the passage of time, where the consequences of erosion and conquest left gaps in knowledge, yet the intrigue lingered like a faint perfume in the air. The team speculated softly, their voices a lullaby against the desert's hush, about how these brewers might have infused their creations with symbolic meanings, beers offered to gods for fertility and protection, their essence tied to the Nile's annual flood. As the sun climbed higher, casting a golden warmth over the site, the archaeologists delved deeper. They uncovered tools alongside the vat's stone grinders smoothed by centuries of use, their surfaces cool and heavy, and strainers woven from palm fibers, still retaining a fibrous texture that crinkled under touch. These artifacts, authenticated through UNESCO cultural heritage surveys, illustrated the brewer's ingenuity. Historical examples from the Cairo Museum's collections show similar implements used in daily life, where beer served as payment for laborers building the pyramids, a liquid sustenance that fueled monumental achievements. The legacy extended beyond tools. It touched the very soil, where grains once sprouted under the sun's benevolent gaze, their stalks swaying in the breeze like a rhythmic dance. The sensory world of that era came alive, the warm, yeasty scent rising from fermentation pots, the soft clink of vessels being sealed with beeswax, and the visual splendor of brew houses adorned with faience beads that glinted like dewdrops in the morning light. In modern Egypt, this ancient craft finds subtle echoes, a calming continuity that bridges eras. While grand breweries in cities like Alexandria produce contemporary beers, the spirit of the old ways persists in home kitchens, where families still mash grains with water drawn from the Nile, its cool flow carrying memories of the past. UNESCO preservation efforts ensure that sites like Giza remain testaments to this heritage, allowing visitors to imagine the brewer's world through reconstructed models and exhibits. One might picture the archaeologists pausing for a moment, sharing a light-hearted quip about how even today, a well-crafted beer could soothe the soul as it did for ancient revelers, a subtle wit threading through their scholarly pursuit. The mystery deepened as evening approached, the sky shifting to a serene palette of purples and blues. What if the vats held more than beer, perhaps encoded messages in their designs, patterns that aligned with celestial events, as suggested by some museum interpretations? The forgotten tales might involve brewers who were also astronomers, blending their arts to create drinks infused with cosmic significance. In a soothing detachment, one could reflect on how such enigmas, born from the sand's embrace, invite contemplation rather than resolution, their consequences a gentle reminder of humanity's enduring curiosity. As the team wrapped their work for the day, the vats were carefully documented and prepared for transport to the museum, their legacy secured for future generations. The air grew cooler, carrying the faint, comforting scent of night-blooming jasmine, and the stars emerged like old friends. Yet even as this chapter closed, the promise of more discoveries lingered, a soft transition to the stories yet to unfold in the heart of Egypt's timeless land.